Hello and welcome to Radio Free Nintendo. It is April 4th, 2024. I don't know, my brain just shut down for a second there. It's like, what does 4-4 mean? I'm James Jones, and I'm having a momentary lapse in judgment, and I'm joined today by Mr. John Lindeman.
It's great to be here, James.
Mr. Greg Lay.
Ahoy, hoy, everyone.
Mr. Guillaume Vayette.
Every Thursday night is a momentary lapse in judgment.
It takes more than a moment, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's more of a regularized, systematic, shall we say.
Yeah. This is episode 869. We are no longer a palindrome edition. And we're going to go ahead and start the show off with listener mail. So, emails. What do you do with emails? Well, emails were a thing that your grandparents used to send messages back and forth across the world. I'm speaking specifically to our Gen Z listeners, of which I assume there's like 5.
We have a few.
We have, well, yeah, I said 5. I think it's probably about right.
Okay.
And when you send an email, it comes to an inbox, and we can all see this inbox. And what do you put in your email? Well, you put words. Don't put pictures of rabbits on a toilet. That's a fucking stupid email. Put words, thoughts, not just random words. Don't just do like a crossword in there or some bullshit. Like, give us a thought, a question, a prompt, an idea you'd like to hear the great minds at Radio Free Nintendo explore. And we, the stand-ins for those great minds, will do our best to pretend that we have meaningful constructs of information to provide to you. Is it good information? I mean, we can all pretend together, right? So, we've got 3 emails queued up this week. I'm saying that to dare myself to not get through all 3 of them. So now I'm on the hook to some degree. So I'm going to ask Greg to read the first email.
Sure. So Max writes, "Greetings, humans, calling yourselves James Jones, Guillaume Vayette, Greg Leahy, and John Lindeman. I often hear that Nintendo is the Disney of video games. I'd like to hear a spirited discussion from the collective known as Radio Free Nintendo regarding the merits of such a comparison. How are they similar? How are they different? Is it fair to make that comparison? Why is there a can of beans sitting on top of the dumpster in the alley? Won't that attract crows? These are important questions that we, the listeners, need answered. Thank you. You all must smell good."
So, yes. But that's because we have practiced good hygiene collectively, not together.
I'm letting myself go, but I just had a shower, so I'm good.
The imperative in there, must, is troubling to me. I don't know.
Could be a directive.
Is this like, is he like Dennis Hopper from Speed, but like instead of like a velocity-based bomb on a bus, it's like if your body odor goes to an unacceptable level, we're just going to have like a biological implant kill us someday.
It's still better than Dennis Hopper in Blue Velvet.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is one of the most evil, like, psychotic characters in cinema history, so yes. Doesn't get decapitated like Dennis Hopper in Speed either.
But the thing is, like, how one defines smell good really depends on the perceiver. There are people who like a certain, like, natural body scent. And so, like, by whose metric are we being evaluated thus that the bomb implanted somewhere around the back of our spine doesn't just detonate? Inquiring minds want to know if I'm about to be obliterated due to working out. Because that would be bad, and I wouldn't appreciate that, you know? Put all that effort in, and then you're just the little small black powder charge goes off right inside your spine, and suddenly, boop, it's over. Anyway, is Nintendo Disney? Yes, next question. Oh, no, we have to address the can of beans. I think we need at least about 20 minutes to get through that part of the email. The long answer is you don't need to put a can of beans on the trash can to attract crows. Crows are naturally attracted to things they shouldn't get into anyway. By offering them the can of beans, it's something of a peace offering. Otherwise, they're going to attempt to force their way into the trash and will make a much bigger mess that way. Because they're very smart and very determined, and also they have the temperament of a 3-year-old child. I'm not joking. That's basically how they're assessed. So they will get into the trash, they will make a mess, and there's nothing you could do to stop them. by giving them the can of beans. You're actually giving them an easier reward that's self-contained, so they won't try to force their way in and make a bigger mess. It's a peace offering. It's a sacrifice to the crows. So always put a can of beans on your trash can. That's the real lesson here.
So this was an actual thing. It was not a out of the left field comment.
No, I just fucking went with it.
Oh, okay, cool.
just the mystery of the improv ruined instantly.
I'm sorry. Yes, well, sometimes these stuff happen. I'm too far north to see crows get into garbage cans. I guess like we don't get so far cockroaches here. It's not really a thing. So I'm always fascinated by tales of finding cockroaches in apartments. Maybe crows are a big deal. Also, I don't know.
I mean, corvids writ large are very smart and they do get into shit. But that's kind of more of a Japan thing, because Japan for nigh on decades insisted that they weren't going to use trash cans. And we're just like, we'll just throw our trash out on the street in bags. And the crows are like, thank you for the bags, which we can easily open with our beaks. And Japan's response was, how can we stop these crows? What if we put nets over the bags? It's like, no, just get trash cans. And their answer was, but our precious sidewalks that they've covered with trash bags. Again, sometimes a culture can get too caught up in the way they do things. But yeah, crows are little bastards. They're smart as shit, and they will get into everything.
So is Disney? No, wait. Is Nintendo
Is Disney a can of beans for Nintendo's crows? Yes.
I mean, in terms of productive output, is this a way of saying that Nintendo is coasting on its older characters, that it just keeps reserving us over and over, reheating,
I don't think that's fair. I mean, from a Disney standpoint, because Disney puts out a new movie every goddamned year, a new animated film, and a lot of times they are original characters these days.
I would say that Nintendo's output is higher quality than Disney for the most part. Consistently.
Yeah, I'm not the best position to answer this. I've never really been that much of a Disney person. It's not really that much of it's not really my choice. A lot of it's just I wasn't taken to see The Little Mermaid and The Lion King and Aladdin and all those movies that a lot of people my age
golden age era
were taken to see, as children. That's not my decision. I wasn't going to walk there myself, was I? I wasn't, so I just didn't get attached to a lot of that era of Disney, and then, through that, you could have got attached to, earlier eras of Disney, and then it kind of carries forward.
I need to interject that the way that my brain interpreted, I haven't been taken to see by The Little Mermaid, was completely different from the way that you meant it.
I haven't been taken to sea by The Little Mermaid to drown.
Exactly. But yeah, please continue.
Yes. Odysseus wasn't there to strap Greg to the mast, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. So, like I said, I don't really have the best kind of feel for, what they were like in the, in the earlier days, of the 80s, 90s, the kind of where they would be overlapping with Nintendo, or indeed, recent times, really. I mean, the only thing, there's a clear difference is that Disney in, the past 20 years or so has made, a very kind of big part of its business acquiring other people's IP and then doing things with it, trying to kind of make it, trying to really, bring their, kind of, massive scale, to kind of put, Marvel stuff, Star Wars stuff, whatever else out on, a kind of, at a pace that, no one else really could do, and on a scale with all these interconnected, everything is, connected to each other, TV shows, films, all that kind of stuff. And, obviously Nintendo, it's a wrench for them to buy next level games who just already make stuff exclusively for them, and it was just a case of like just making it official, really, and that's what the people at Next Level wanted to do, and they acquiesced. I mean, that's about as much as you can get out of Nintendo. They're not going to buy Star Wars for $4 billion and then make games out of it or something. Like, that's just not what they do. It's so that straight away is a clear difference of like today's Disney, which is like, let's use our power on other people's stuff and bring all this stuff under one roof, rather than Nintendo's kind of use of its legacy characters. That part, I guess there's more of a comparison to make, but I'm just not well situated to make it.
I wonder if it's sort of the twilight of the acquisitions era. One, because I don't think Disney's going to be allowed to make another major acquisition. I think they would face some significant pushback, at least under the current U.S. administration. But a lot of that was in the ramp up for the streaming wars, and the streaming wars have kind of
fizzled.
They petered out quite a bit. Yeah. Like their biggest competitors in that space are Netflix, who is still kind of stomping around with some kind of amount of VC money, because there's still stuff on there, the Netflix, that just smells like cash. The Amazon play, which I don't know what to make of what they're at right now. Very weirdly run streaming service. And then, like a bunch of also-rans. So they've kind of settled into their spot as the number 2, and they just seem to be, or I don't know, maybe the HBO one is number 2. But like they've kind of settled into their market position, and they just kind of roll with it. Like Hulu might be some of their more direct competition. It's their own service.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So, like, I do think that there is a parallel in modern Nintendo pre-Switch. So, I think there was a shift. We know there was a shift. They told us there was a shift in the post-Wii U pre-Switch era, which I would argue was about 4 years. That Nintendo started talking about, we're going to make more effort to license our IP. I believe this was the Day the Music Died press conference, wasn't it? The episode that I think that came from the same press conference. Oh, that press conference was when the sales figures came out, I think, for the Wii U, and we're like, oh, Mario Kart 8 didn't save this. But there was another episode where this was the one where they said, we're gonna make mobile games, we're gonna license our IP, and all that stuff. That was the point where I think Nintendo really paid closer attention to what Disney does and how Disney operates. Now, Disney in-houses a lot of this shit. In fact, they've even started in-housing some games again. Sort of, kinda. But there is a parallel to, hey, we're going to not just license, we're going to manage our partners we license with. Nintendo's licensed stuff out plenty of times in the past. I mean, we've talked about it. We have that fucking Soupy Sales Donkey Kong show to point to. Like, they did licensing fine in the past. I said on the show here that they were Mega Bloks, or John threw Mega Bloks out here and I confirmed it. But no, Nintendo wasn't even Mega Bloks. They were the company that makes Kinects. I got corrected by GX in the Discord, who knows a thing or two about Lego. Kinects for a little while made a sub-brand that was Lego knockoff for some reason. And that's what was attached to the Nintendo license. A failed sub-brand of a third-tier also-ran building toys company. Now they're like prime Lego material. Like, they're managing that's a single example, but they're managing their brand in a much more active way. They're seeking out the best partners for them. They are treating their product as a premium, and they are making sure that you can engage with the brand, not necessarily the game, and in litany ways in order to engage audiences both of different age brackets, different socioeconomic brackets, different market positions, different places on Earth, quite literally, in ways that just putting your games on Switch might not do. Because if you just say, like, if you want to play a Mario, or if you want to experience Super Mario, you must do it on the Switch. While there are many, 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 many many Switches in the wild, that is still exclusionary of a significant portion of the population. So by making Super Mario himself something you can experience many different ways, be it in a movie that made a lot of money or on streaming services playing that same movie, toys, cross-promotion at like fucking Happy Meals, a theme park, all that stuff. A lot of these things they've done in the past, not a theme park, but they hadn't done them well. Like that movie's fucking terrible. It's fucking terrible. And it bears no real relation to what the brand is. Every TV show they've made is bad. All of them. When there is the inevitable Nintendo featured TV show, it won't be bad. We might not like it, but it will at least be of a minimum quality because they will not let it get made if it isn't. They are actively engaged in this process. And so that, in that respect, being much more focused on being an IP company than just a games production company is very Disney. Disney is not a movie company, although they do make a lot of movies. That is a thing that they do. It is a core pillar of their business. But they manage the IP from those films into other contexts. They operate, I only found out about this a couple weeks ago. They operate a resort in Hawaii. And it's not like a Disney park. It's a Hawaiian resort. It's Polynesian themed, and it's got subtle use of the Polynesian characters that they have created and featured in content over the last couple decades. So Lilo and Stitch representation, Moana, stuff like that. But it's subtle, it's managed, and like it was a brand synergy thing they could do. But that resort seems to be targeting adults. It's pretty high end. And like that's how they manage it. Same with their cruise lines. There's never going to be a Nintendo cruise. That would be a fucking nightmare. It'd be a fucking nightmare. But they manage their cruise and they present their IP on said ships at different ways to approach different audiences. Mickey's still going to be out there for the all-you-can-eat breakfast to meet with the kids so they can have the Mickey-shaped waffles, which is a trademark of all Disney properties. But there are more high-end experiences, high-end restaurants, high-end bars and stuff that target the adults that are on the ship that are really classy but still leverage their IP in a way that feels organic. And it's not just like we got to stick whatever on this one to make it Disney themed. Like they spend a lot of time and effort and energy. I mean, they have a title for it. It's called Imagineer. It's a position that exists to figure out how to apply their brand in a way that makes sense for the audience that this is targeting and in a way that feels organic and increases the value of the experience such that we can charge more. And so when you have Miyamoto going out and doing repeated international trips to design a theme park, or, I mean, Aonuma's been seen at Nintendo Land in Orlando. Like, they're not hiding what they're talking about right now. I don't know if they're going to build a Zelda space, but it wouldn't surprise me if they brought him out there to get his thoughts on what it would be in Brainstorm and see what they're already doing. We talked about it, like Nintendo didn't just like sign the rights to make a Mario movie. Miyamoto was involved, and they brought the leader of the studio onto their board. They're really working on how to not just use their IP, but leverage best of brand and do it correctly and make it feel premium, I guess is the word I want to use. Like, it's not just, we talked about those Mario building block kits. They looked like shit. Well, they teased Mario Kart stuff at the end of the Mario Day thing that Lego put out, because Lego put out their own fucking direct for Mario Day. And I guarantee you those things are, one, be expensive, and two, look extremely premium and probably have some kind of cool interactivity.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that Nintendo they always kind of prided themselves on having a premium kind of experience in everything else except what they used to license, which was just usually just complete garbage.
Right. It was crap.
Yep.
You can go see it, like the old Jack specific toys.
Yeah,
shit.
They always tried to just cheap everything out.
Yeah. And they just signed it to whoever wanted to write the check.
Yep. When they completely didn't have to do that, and in fact, I mean, maybe they did back in the 80s, but now when there's so much nostalgia wrapped around their brand, I mean, Jesus, they can just...
Oh, the Switch's success probably helped their negotiating position, too.
Yep.
I mean, that Mario Kart movie is not going to hurt either.
No.
Now, the people they brought in to make the Zelda movie, that's going to be a fucking train wreck. It's going to be a disaster. It's going to be awful. But we just have to all collectively agree to memory hole that movie. Immediately. Like, on the day of release. Don't even Morbius it. Yeah, I think that's the biggest parallel is they've really grown to recognize that the value of their IP, not just in having a Mario cereal box that's also an amiibo, which is a thing that happened, by the way, if you don't remember this. But in creating experiences around their IP, which sounds like I'm Paul marketing it. But we have, 3 Nintendo parks now? I don't know if the Orlando one's opened yet, but we will. We will have 3 Nintendo theme parks. And there will be more. There will be more stuff. They will build more things. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see them try to create some other kind of experience things that you can do. Maybe not right now because money's so tight, but in the future. Like, there is a recognition that expanding your IP brand is valuable that they did not seem to have before, and that is good because that brings them stability if they have a console cycle that doesn't go well. I guess the other thing that came up though is like acquiring IP, which they don't do much of. They did acquire Bayonetta for reasons known only to God.
Mm-hmm. Well, they didn't acquire the IP. That still belongs to SaGa.
The exclusivity or some shit.
They funded the second. They funded the second, third, and Origins games. You know, so they made them possible. SaGa retains ownership of Bayonetta. SaGa always has to be credited with that, which is part of what makes it a little bit more improbable that Nintendo funded those 3 games because it's another company that has to get their part of the pie, and they're never going to sell that many. So yeah, as we said, that was one of those things that was never really seemingly about certainly not only about selling. It was about the kind of early days of both the Wii U and the Switch. Although the games took a while to arrive, of saying, oh, look, we've got a diverse range of experience. It isn't just all the things that you normally associate with Nintendo. And then I guess it went, well enough in some respects, at least. Bayonetta 2's a great game, but obviously it couldn't have sold that much because it was like a relatively mid to late Wii U game. So, that they went ahead with a third one. But again, they announced that really early, super ahead of time, right? Because it was a Game Awards thing, right? But the reason why they did that is because Wii U wasn't too hot, and then you've got Switch, and you're worried about getting, a big user base in, and you think you've got to demonstrate that you've got a range of experiences. It will be interesting to see if there's any kind of, I don't know whether I want to say complacency or just confidence or whatever with the next platform, where it's like, yeah, we don't need to do stuff like that anymore. I mean, I'm not saying whether that would be a good idea or a bad idea or anything, but the circumstances will be different, and you do wonder how that will affect things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they're in pretty deep at this point, though. Like, I would actually expect their if they became egotistical or complacent, for them to maybe be more demanding in that space. I don't know.
No, it's hard to say. It's just, do you feel like you need to, kind of prove to anyone that it's like, don't worry, like we're gonna have games on this thing. Like, maybe you just think that that's expected. That's, we don't need to try. We just, especially for something that what they couldn't show like in the near term because it was years away. I mean, it was like 22 by the time it came out, rather than like 2018 or whatever it was when it got announced. Like in the early, the Switch hadn't even been out for a year or whatever. So yeah, I could imagine it just it'll be a different situation. Now they've collaborated with Platinum quite a lot and on other things that aren't just Bayonetta. So maybe that'll be the point. They'll just kind of have something that cuts SaGa out. Perhaps, and still fills a bit of a spot in terms of, different, again, just having that range of things, because while Nintendo will publish, they'll develop or, they have very close development partners, like make quite a range of stuff, there's still kind of holes, isn't there, that they'll feel like, especially for a particular period of time, there's like, we need more quantity and we need more diversity, and that's where those kind of relationships where they've cultivated something over time really come in handy, doesn't it? They feel like they can rely on those people to deliver what they're looking for in a particular spot. So yeah, wouldn't be surprised at all to see them collaborate with Platinum again, especially isn't there like a former Nintendo guy is like the president of the company now, so yes. Yeah, you think they'd be closer than ever. But yeah, the broader point is that, I suppose, they might look on occasion to, it's usually when they're in trouble, right? Where it's like, okay, let's throw some money around to get some exclusivity of things that people might have thought or said we were lacking in the past. Like, look at GameCube, right? It's like, the Capcom stuff. That was very much like, we didn't really have Resident Evil until it was like too late, right? I mean, the Resident Evil 2 port is like quite an impressive technical feat for the N64, but it was like 99 by then. And, Resident Evil had already become very strongly associated with PlayStation in particular, although it was on Saturn, right, as well. But the ship had sailed a bit, and there's, this time, we'll throw money around, make Capcom make a bunch of games. We had Remake and Zero, and eventually Resident Evil 4, and, Beautiful Joe, and all this kind of stuff. And think about Twin Snakes, right? It's like, we missed out on Metal Gear. Well, here's Metal Gear again, but remade. When they have trouble, they might throw around some money to say, let's get some exclusives, but it's very much like on a rental basis. Like, we just need a bit of help right now. Doesn't tend to be the like, oh God, let's, buy something. Like, it's really tough to get them to buy anything, even though, as has been mentioned in previous episodes, previous emails, they're sitting on this war chest that they could, right. Again, look, let's not kid ourselves. They are microscopic compared to Microsoft, or, sure, small compared to Sony, but still, they could make acquisitions if they wanted to. They have made some on occasion that have been smaller scale. Obviously, Monolith comes to mind as one that I think has been quite fruitful in its own way, even if it's not necessarily just like, Monolith made a game that sold like 30 million copies or so, but it's more kind of diffuse than that. But I think it's been really valuable for them.
But even then, they weren't going after the IP. No,
it seems like it was more expertise in that case. Yeah.
A good example where they haven't done this is HAL. HAL owns Kirby. Nintendo doesn't own Kirby. Now, Nintendo has some claims on Kirby, so like you can't go make a Kirby game for another system. Like, you telling me Nintendo couldn't put together an offer in a day and walk across the hall where HAL is located in the building and just slap a check down on a table and say, we own this place if you sign this check, and walk out of the room owning HAL? They absolutely could. Is there value in it? Well, HAL makes a shitload of money monetizing Kirby. Kirby cafes, Kirby merch, Kirby CDs. Maybe, as you said, like Nintendo kind of turned a corner where it kind of had to face the music with the investors and say, when it was Wii U was really, really bad, and say, okay, actually we're doing all this stuff to try and make more money more different ways, right? And including the mobile game initiative. But
and then that extended to licensing out characters, movies, theme parks, and so forth, being more proactive in that space. But that's the thing, in all that time where they'd been a bit restrained or, kind of low level in that regard, yeah, Hal and Kirby had a very different attitude. We did have a Kirby animated series in the aughts, and the amount of even just stuff like soundtracks and all the goods that they have, especially Japan. It just was way more enthusiastic than what Nintendo proper was doing with their characters for a lot of that time.
I mean, look at a company they're 1/3 owner of, with Pokemon Company. It exists solely to do this. And has been doing it for 25 years. And Nintendo's like, well, I don't know. We'll take a more askance view at this kind of
I think you got to think that the experience that they had in the earlier 90s, where you had a kind of a 1-2 punch of the CDI debacle with licensing out Hotel Mario, Wanda Gamelon, all that with the Zelda stuff.
Yeah.
And then the Mario movie, which, whatever you think about it creatively, as you already mentioned, James, it just it's not consistent with the brand. It's not compatible with the overall image that you're trying to sell, what Nintendo were trying to sell at the time. So I think they just retreated. Really quite severely after that. And then, anything that was had its own little carve out, like Kirby and Pokemon, they went wild, because why wouldn't you? They were
Fire Emblem.
Popular games, and anything that had that little bit, the little bit of latitude. They were taking advantage of commercial opportunities that were placed in front of them, but Nintendo, not that they were doing nothing, but it was either low level stuff or very reserved, all that. And it does seem like, yes, we've reached the end of that era, now, certainly quite decisively, but that's not really that doesn't make them that much like Disney for me. Isn't that everyone at this point?
I would say it's made them more like Disney than they were.
Yes, I think that's fair. But, like I said, everybody is pushing the limits nowadays of, how powerful is our brand, and how many other places can we take it, and all that kind of stuff. It's certainly not something that's exclusive to Disney on the kind of film studio side, and Nintendo on the video game side. So I suppose some of the historical elements of before that kind of retrenchment that they went on. It was the early 90s. You could, if you're old enough, you might remember this whole sort of period where it's surveys suggest more people recognize Mario than Mickey Mouse, and he's he's the new Mickey Mouse, right? He's just this mascot that's everywhere. And as I understand it, at the time, Disney's actual content didn't really feature Mickey.
Still doesn't.
Yeah, but it was just, but he's the Disney mascot, right? He's just everywhere. He's, the image that's on loads of merch and whatever. And Mario was kind of both. They were making plenty of legit Mario games around that time, and slapping him on spin-off type games, and of course in the really early days it was he's the ref in Punch-Out, and he's the umpire in tennis, and he's the golfer in golf, and he's just everywhere. So there was that whole component of it, but even that kind of died down a bit, I guess, probably for two reasons. First of all, what we already talked about with them getting a little bit more conservative about maybe licensing the Mario stuff out, although he certainly appeared in more and more spin-off games from Nintendo. And I guess the other thing is that Mickey got less relevant as well. And again, I'm not that sort of learned on this stuff, but I think that's the general kind of feeling.
I think where Nintendo doesn't that Disney does is that Disney is consistently trying to create new IP. Now, sometimes they end up creating Wish, which is bad and the market rejected it. But sometimes they create fucking Frozen or Cars or, these mega hits that become incredibly valuable, reinvestable IP that they can run their business off lucratively. And it feeds back into everything. it feeds back into the things they put in their resorts. It feeds back into their toy offerings. It feeds back into their programming. They'll have a show that just kills it, and then a movie that just kills it, and then they'll make a spin-off show for it. Or they might make 2 spin-off shows for it. They might make a show that targets younger children, like preschool age, and they might make one that targets older children. And toys and clothes and music and all this stuff. Like, they're constantly trying to develop the next IP so that they can mine it. Whereas Nintendo doesn't do that much. They're not constantly trying to put together the next IP. Like, they have created new IP. It's not fair to say they haven't. Like, we have, Splatoon, for example.
Splatoon's probably the best example, Reese, just in terms of how it feels genuinely quite major. It's like more concentrated in Japan, but, you look at the sales globally, and it's a major thing. You've had other things like Pikmin before that, at this point, it's lasted quite a long time. And, it feels like maybe Pikmin 4 has had a little bit of a broader reach than previously, but still, and it helps, being on a console that's actually popular. But even Splatoon started on Wii U, and that was, the worst place to start in so many ways, and yet it still, felt like, we're onto something with this. So that's the thing again, the desperation of those sorts of times, it brings these things out of them, more to experiment or to try and get weird exclusives or all that. And we're quite a few years removed from that now, unless things go awry with the next system, and then we'll be back there again. But that's the thing. It feels like when they settle in, it is much more manage the ones you've got. And maybe some spin-offy type things, but rather than entirely original.
I feel like that's the one place where they could really stand to be more like Disney. Like learning the lesson about licensing, and not just hey, we're going to do license, but licensing for quality was good. But taking the next step of saying hey, we actually have really good designers here who can come up with good ideas and put together compelling characters and, really motivate people to design the next Nintendo IP. They don't all have to be Mario level quality, but if it can be something that you can license and leverage the brand, that's money. That's money that can be made. And it's not just for the benefit of the money, but I think it's for a benefit of keeping their lineup looking fresh. If you look at the shelf, and I say this as somebody who is not, normally impacted by this. If you go look at a shelf of Switch retail games, which aren't that big these days, they don't keep a lot of active retail stock. It's a lot of Mario. Now, they're different Mario things.
Yeah. And it's also been in the wake of the Mario movie, and we already talked about this.
Sure.
Just the way the releases have been so. This year is just ridiculous. Almost the uniformity of it, isn't it? Mario versus DK, Peach, Paper Mario, Luigi's Mansion. It's all in that little radius.
Being able to make your lineup look more diverse on its own is valuable. And I have to give them credit. Things like ARMS. ARMS looks fucking wild and nonsense. It didn't take off, but it certainly looks fucking nonsensical.
Yeah, and they did try. That was a case where, that was something they did in a kind of launch period where maybe something like that has a better chance to catch on because people are looking for things to play and a bit more open-minded, maybe. Although admittedly, the actual install base is not going to be that big. But, that was a case of them giving it a shot. And you have to, right? Because it's just, again, it's a kind of microcosm of the broader thing about diversifying revenue and all that kind of, with different types of business entirely. Within this, it's, there are trends. There are things that wax and wane with particular genres, particular characters, whatever it might be. You can't count on them as much as you can try and you improve your chances by managing it very carefully and producing, products that people like. You can't just entirely bank on, this is popular and it will always be popular without any real fluctuations. You need other irons in the fire. You need other, kind of prospects, that you keep developing because other, kind of brands in the portfolio may not entirely drop out or whatever, but they might at least fall out of favour or just not be something you can exploit in the near term. So you need other things coming through.
Yeah, I mean, I think I know this is gonna rub some people the wrong way, but I don't give a fuck. F-Zero's brand, the actual the character designs and shit, are extremely 90s. And I legitimately think a lot of them are unsalvageable. Like, you couldn't put them in a modern game. They're not compelling to look at, or they're upsetting to look at. And that's fine. That happens. Certain things have their moment, and then they age through, and they're not cool anymore. But there's no reason that they can't have a second racing game, a second racing series. I mean, they still have fucking cruising. They don't do anything with that shit. Which technically speaking, I think they've got some ownership stake in, although they seem to have largely divested themselves of it.
I mean, they could they could reboot F-Zero, reboot that franchise.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, the GBA game I talked about last week is kind of interesting, actually, because it doesn't really have any other traditional cars or characters in it, or even a lot of the track names. It's kind of weird. It's always a soft, this is generations later reboot without and I think there are unlocks of cars that have some kind of callback and whatnot. But no, I mean that's the thing. I mean, what matters about F-Zero is it's just high-speed futuristic racing. You could totally just leave everything else behind and it's not a big deal. But also you could just leave F-Zero behind and have another, racing game to just feel look, Mario Kart is this ridiculous juggernaut. Surely there's some way we can nudge people towards, you like Mario Kart, you can play this as well. Because there are other genres that they've done that with, where it's okay, well, this is kind of the flagship game, of that sort on this platform. But then, we expect some percentage of players, we hope that they'll go and seek out some of these other games and they'll do well for themselves on that basis. You would have thought when the starting point is as big as Mario Kart's got, then, that would be viable, and perhaps it will be in the next cycle, but still, a little odd.
Cool. All right. Well, then, John, would you read the next email?
Certainly.
And this isn't the setup because I don't remember what. Okay, it's this one.
All right. Tokyo Massage Sessions writes, Dear James and his Three Clever Boys podcast, Corpse Party 2 and Corpse Party 2 are two completely Roman numeral are two completely different video games, neither of which happen to continue the story of Corpse Party 1. Somehow, Corpse Party 2U is a third, mostly unrelated game, and not a port of Corpse Party for the Wii U. Double Dragon 4 is a video game released 23 years after Double Dragon 5. The reason for this is unclear and leaves doctors baffled to this day. Final Fantasy XIII 2 exists. Which brings us to Luigi's Mansion 2. Obviously, where else would I be going with this? Numbers are dumb, a thought Nintendo of America clearly had when they changed the name of the game from 2 to Dark Dawn. Yet here we are, a mere 11 years later, and the game is coming back to America with the 2 intact.
It's Dark Moon, for the record.
Dark Dawn is...
It's Golden Sun 3.
Right.
Yeah, which they didn't
Golden
put
Sun was never numbered.
They didn't put a number on either of the follow-ups for Golden Sun, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I guess my question is, what do you think compels Nintendo to stick or to not stick a number on something? Or even to remove numbers, as Nintendo of America did, not only with Luigi's Mansion 2, but with Sin and Punishment 2, Endless Ocean 2, and A Link Between Worlds, Triforce of the Gods 2 in Japan. And then there's Mario Kart, obviously a well-worn topic, but still. Sincerely waiting on Mario Kart 8 Deluxe 2.
That would be incredible, to be fair. If that's what it was.
Can you imagine the absolute nuclear explosion I would have on this show if they announced the Mario Kart?
And the thing is, it's not really that far outside of reality either.
And when it is as successful as it's been, again, will they close it in on nearly something absolutely ridiculous? Isn't it? Is it
175 trillion copies?
It's more than 50 million, I think. It might even be pushing towards 60 or so. It's absurd, I think, at this point. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. So it's got to be tempting to just stick a 2 on that, because that a lot of the time might be the dividing line, right? It's like, okay, if something is just that damn hot, you just stick a 2 on it, right? And I guess the thing about like Luigi's Mansion was, was it that sort of commercially huge in the first place? Well, no, it was a launch title for GameCube. I think it did okay, but certainly, the really big sellers on GameCube, you think, first and foremost, you think of Melee, obviously. Right. And so it's maybe that played a part in it. But obviously you get different scenarios. I mean, with the Final Fantasy one, it's to explicitly tell people that, well, this is a Final Fantasy game that actually has a continuing story from game to game, whereas of course the numbered installments don't generally. When you go to 13 and 14, you not only are you not continuing the story of 13, you're changing genres to an MMO.
All right, but hear me out, because Final Fantasy 13 has 2 sequels.
Lightning Returns. What the hell's that?
Lightning Returns, Final Fantasy 13.
Yes, not 13.3, so they broke their own convention there. But of course, that wasn't the first to do it, because there was 10.2. 10.2 was the first one that did that, as I recall. But yeah, that's a whole other kettle of fish, because that's completely unique. Like, what series has numbered installments that do not follow on from each other in a narrative way? It's, very, very sort of special in that regard.
What about a series that does half the time?
Yeah,
Bravely Default.
Yeah, clearly Bravely's going to come up in this. It's like Bravely Second or Bravely Default 2, and yeah, it's an interesting one. I can think of some cases which have been where, like, for instance, Yoshi's Island DS was one time shown as Yoshi's Island 2, and then had the 2 taken off it. And I mean, it's certainly one interpretation. I don't know. There's no way to substantiate this is what was actually thought of at Nintendo anywhere. Is that they basically thought it wasn't really worthy of having the 2 on there. The feeling of like, maybe this game, maybe we should consider this is mostly like, it's not a remake because the levels are different and there's some different abilities with different babies and it plays out of the 2 screens and all that, but it's so close to the original. It's such a kind of rehash for the most part that maybe they felt like this shouldn't be a sequel. It should be more like, oh, it's the DS version of it, which is somewhat fraught with problems, because when you do that, then people think, well, is this like Super Mario 64 DS? Where it is essentially the same game, but it just has, as Super Mario 64, but it does has a few, they had extra playable characters, extra mini games, some extra levels and bosses, but it's a port of Mario 64. So, that was a kind of an interesting choice. And again, we don't know for sure why they would make that choice. I mean, I would have thought with quite a few of the examples that were mentioned there, for instance, like with Sin and Punishment, it's like, how many people played the original Sin and Punishment? Like, very few, because it was...
And it was like several platforms earlier, right?
Yeah,
like, I kind of wonder if like the distance in terms of platforms and time is a factor.
The only thing it had on its side was that it was on Virtual Console, and seemingly there was at least something about the response there that made them thought this was, somewhat viable. And that was, the same Virtual Console. That was Wii, which you would be playing, Sin and Punishment 2 or whichever, because this was the age of the kind of bifurcated localization titles that we're so fond of, a little bit of Dr. Mario and so on. So in that case, it was Star Successor in America and Successor of the Skies in Europe. So once again, just a more literal translation, I think.
What?
I kind of wonder if like if there's like another entry on the same system is basically the main thing that determines if it gets a number or not. Like, Mario Kart is kind of exempted from that because no one expects, like Nintendo wouldn't expect people to wait on playing Mario Kart 8, like trying to catch up, like, well, I got to play like 1 through 7 first.
Yeah.
But something like Pikmin, like maybe Pikmin 4 is Pikmin 4, despite the fact that it came out, like 20 years later than the first Pikmin, because Pikmin 3 Deluxe was already on the Switch.
Yep.
I have a question about a little bit of Mario.
A little bit of Dr. Mario.
Just a little bit.
But which part of Dr. Mario is it?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. But the point is, I mean, yeah, that was a whole era unto itself, where it's like, okay, no, we don't care about global search discoverability or any of that kind of thing. Like, let's have different title. We're Nintendo of Europe. We will have the title that's right for Europe. I mean, yes.
And that title is complete nonsense, literal gibberish.
It's just, do it more literally was almost always the kind of answer there. So yeah, that maybe with Sin and Punishment, it was clearly just like, look, we don't want to suggest at all that you need to have played this game to appreciate the N64 game on Virtual Console. Either you could have done, because it was right there for like 1,200 Wii points or whatever. But how many people actually like played Virtual Console, let alone like the more like darker corners of it, like import games that they probably said, no, let's not try and have anyone think that they need to be familiar with that at all and take the number away. Like that seems logical to me. And that would somewhat apply to Luigi's Mansion as well, because again, it's GameCube, you're going back quite a way. And then, it's on a new platform, and it's just like that. Let's just hope for people to engage with it on its own terms a bit more. Now, of course, Luigi's Mansion, as we've mentioned a few times, has become a commercial juggernaut, and therefore, it's like Luigi's Mansion 3 sold all these copies. Well, no, this is 2. This is the one before. This will enrich your enjoyment of 3, which you must have done because so many people played it. It's amazing that that's come
you've
around.
Played 3, now you can play 2, where it all started. Wait, no. Forget about this.
Run.
I guess that's kind of true with regard to next level games making it, but yeah, that's not really going to be something most people are cognizant of, or it really should be.
No.
I'm very excited for the prospect of like, what do we like? Let's go. Like, Zelda games never get numbered. Like, so,
with the exception of what was pointed out by TMS there, with there was a clear. It is just that simple. Triforce of the Gods, which was the subtitle in Japan of A Link to the Past 2.
I wonder if it's just like they didn't feel like they could come up with a way to make the title so obvious. Like, this game is related.
Yeah, the pun, basically, and it's like the Japanese love puns, don't they?
They fucking can't help themselves.
I'm kind of surprised they opted out of some sort of pun there, but yeah, maybe it just didn't quite work the same way. Although the problem is because like Link has been in quite other titles like Adventure of Link and Link's Awakening. I'm not sure if it was that like screaming to players what exactly they were doing, the connotations of it as maybe as clearly as they thought.
I mean, that's possible. Like, I honestly, like, I've played both of those games. I don't feel like the connection between the two is really that meaningful. Like, the map is the same.
I agree with you, though. The map is the key part, really. But like, in terms of like, it feels like they were quite at pains to say, like, story-wise, we're not going to make it feel like this in some way, like, really like advances the specific narrative, of A Link to the Past. It feels like you just pick up like right after it ended or something. It's still like, oh well, yes, it's that world because it's the same map, but like somehow the Dark World is back, which like that's the ending of A Link to the Past, is that the Dark World is made like nice. So like somehow it's exactly the way it was, but it's low rule now, and like it doesn't really matter on a narrative level.
No, I think the thing to keep in mind is, and we talked about this last week, when you're coming up with the name for a sequel, I think it makes sense to say like, unless they're like really sequentially related, don't go with the number. So I wonder then, we talked about it last week, like what's the sequel to Disaster Day of Crisis? And we talked about like Disaster Weeks of Crisis or whatever.
Yes.
But
I've got it, by the way. I mean, this might be like, it could either be if you're just like really like the Disaster series is a runaway success, and you've done,
which it already is.
You've done weeks and months and years, and you've got, or you could just skip to this to get the appropriate level of like epic Disaster Age of Crisis.
Oh, wow. Epic of Crisis.
I think,
or if you're taking like a different, like maybe you change writer and director, and you kind of take it into a more like a different direction. Like instead of action, it's more horror or something. Call it like just Disasters.
I mean, you could have a crossover with Nicolas Cage. You can call it Cage of Crisis.
All right, so I think, Greg, I know what Disaster Age of Crisis is. So it's like everything's fucked up. There's fighting. There's all this kind of stuff. And at the end, you're at a house and a news broadcast comes on about an experiment going wrong on a space station. Congratulations, you just hit Xenoblade 1.
Yeah, Project Exodus has been initialized because it's just the Age of Crisis. Like, yeah, this ain't getting fixed, is it? It's just too messed up. The bears are out there with the Kalashnikovs or whatever. So
abandon this talk planet. Now.
Yeah, abandon the planet. We're out of here.
I just like the idea of a very old Ray in a wheelchair going, "The bears talk now." And they're like, yeah, we know. We put the voice box on them. We didn't think they'd immediately start robbing banks. It's like, yeah, that bears.
Okay, it turns out that Ray is it Bryce, his surname?
Yes, Raymond Bryce.
At some point, like we find out, like his real name, or like he changed his name, or he changed his name at the end, is Van Damme. So
oh no,
he's the original.
Oh, fuck.
It fits the action movie bullshit and the Xenoblade lore connection. It's perfect.
And his head is kind of Van Damme shaped, too.
Oh, yeah.
They all kind of have that same square block head.
That is somewhat where that thought is coming from. That, some of the same artists presumably did work on those.
Oh, man. See, Nintendo, we just gave you the next 5 games in the Disaster series, which I know they're all in flight right now, like you're making Avatar, but this is more important. This is much more. Get James Cameron from the bottom of the ocean, where he probably is right now, and get him making the next Disaster game. Also, the movie spinoff, which we know he'll be good at. Fuck, they could do a lot. That's the value of building up these licenses.
Yeah.
I like that we've now combined these 2 emails, is that they could have had an entire generation. They could have gone through like the height of the Disaster movie era with Nintendo branded Disaster Day of Crisis films. And they didn't. We missed out on someone actually being Ray and Steve in real. Like, imagine the best supporting actor for somebody whose only role is falling into volcano. He's only on the film for 3 minutes, but God, what an impact those 3 minutes made. It's right there. We could have done it, and we didn't.
To be fair, I think William Hurt won a Best Supporting Actor. I think he won it rather than just got nominated for being in A History of Violence by David Cronenberg, and he's in that for like a matter of minutes. It's a very brief. He's good, but it's like criminy. That's some efficient to get an Oscar out of that.
It's like at the very end, isn't he? Like the SS officer or something like that.
His History of Violence is like Vigo.
Oh no, I'm thinking of Vigo History X.
Yeah, Viggo Mortensen is a kind of someone who had a past in organised crime,
right?
And he kind of gave it up, and he lives away from it and all that, but he gets pulled back in. Yeah, and William Hurt's like the mob boss or whatever at the end. He is just at the end, so you had me going there.
Yeah.
What do we call the sequel to Punch-Out?
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, I mean, Super
just add a
used
third
to be
exclamation.
Super used to be something that did, kind of it was a sequel thing, wasn't it? Right. Long before it was like, oh well, it's on Super Nintendo, so it's
Super Mario.
For instance, Super Mario Brothers, and because it was with the Punch Out in the arcade, like the sequel was Super Punch Out. right?
Right.
Before the Super Nintendo game was that.
I think that it would be probably a gritty reboot, and it would be called The Punch-Out.
Oh.
The Punch-Out.
I mean, you could just go with if you wanted to make it like a film spin-off, though, you could just go with The Punch.
That is the thing with where there is sometimes a point with film series, it seems like, where they're content for numerals up to a point, and then it's like when they start getting too high, they're like, nah, let's take those off.
I heard somebody who works in cinema describe it as the executives get embarrassed that they don't have new ideas.
It becomes we're going to get the piss taken out of us, like Back to the Future Part 2 with like Jaws 12 or whatever. Like it gets to. So I think, is it Mission Impossible? I think they stopped doing numbers at 4.
Yes.
Like they did. There was Mission Impossible 4, but not 5. Like that was subtitle. And then, was Final Destination, the horror movies, like it was 1, 2, and 3, and then it was The Final Destination, or like The Fast and the Furious was, 1, 2, 3, well, Tokyo Drift, I guess, but, and then just Fast and Furious.
They fucked around.
But then they brought the numbers back, because it was Fast 5.
Right. Well, it was hard to do, 8 Fast, 8 Furious. It doesn't work out so well.
Exactly.
No, but they did Fate of the Furious, right?
Yeah.
That's true, they did. Yes.
Yep.
Speaking of which, John, I just happened across Ejectocito scene on TV the other day.
Okay.
Just flipping through channels, and I'm like, oh, no, this is the scene.
Yep.
And then I left. That's all you need. It could just be that scene on loop for an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's amazing how cheap those movies were early on. Just how absolutely just poor and poorly shot, poorly edited.
Yeah, they were. That whole series started off as let's just make a movie as cheaply as possible and hope that some teenagers watch it.
Now it's basically like superhero films.
Yeah,
it's so ridiculous, so ridiculous.
It's an interesting case though, like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. Like that, that could Nintendo could have gone into a 13-2 type of place there.
Breath of the Wild 2?
But they didn't, did they? And I mean, not just in terms of they didn't number it that way, or they didn't even do the sort of cute Link Between Worlds thing and have Wild or Breath still in the title. Right. But
they still went with something that comes out of the body of the place.
Sure.
So,
but some of that is just the blank
Piss
of the blank,
or
blank of blank. Like that's so many subtitles of that, aren't they? It's just a formula.
Secretions of the sky.
That's worse than Piss of the Kingdom.
Well, some sort of precipitation, I guess. But no, it's with the narrative element though as well, as we've said many times. Like they're almost like, I mean, everything about this suggests there should be a lot more acknowledgement of the first one, but we're not going to do it.
Right.
Because they just feel like it's like alienating, presumably. Like they just do not want people to, they really seem to live in terror. And I guess it's more justified when it's one thing if it's a movie series and it's like, okay, if it's like 100-minute movie that you haven't watched. When it's a gigantic open adventure game that you might play for like 120 hours, I guess it is more logical to be worried that people might think, oh no, well, I don't have time for that.
That's the thing, Nintendo is in this weird position where it's not weird, they probably love it, but it's if we're talking about, now this is starting to get outdated, but someone in a store looking at games on a wall, they might very well have both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom next to each other.
Oh, they do.
There, and so I guess Nintendo was thinking in that scenario, we don't want someone to be well, I want to play the newest one. I haven't played the first one though, and then kind of just give up on that idea. So they whichever one the person picks up, as long as it's not pre-used, they don't mind. They're going to make the same money.
That's the same,
way,
yeah.
So.
And maybe that. Yeah, and of course we know they do keep selling, the games that were in like the first year of the system, like they do keep selling in Nintendo's case. So, it's probably a bit more of a consideration than with, other companies or, other kind of settings. So, it's a fair point. And like I say, it goes way beyond like what's on the box, what's the title. It's the content of the game. Like they're just like, we don't want to let on too much that there was like this predecessor that took place in the same world, and like build in a bunch of connections or have anything that would really lead anyone to even entertain the idea that there's critical information that they've missed by not playing that game. Like they're just really averse to that as even a possibility.
Yeah. I do. The only other one I could think of was their involvement in the Baten Kaitos sequel. They slapped the word Origins on it in the West, which is technically true, and then called it Baten Kaitos 2 in Japan, which is extremely not true, because it is very much not the sequel to Baten Kaitos, since it's 100 years prior. But the only other example I could think of that is Lufia, where Lufia 2 takes place. Lufia 2 is the start of... The end of Lufia 2 is the start of Lufia 1.
Yeah, there's like a prologue in the original Lufia that is the climax of Lufia 2, right? So
which doesn't make any fucking sense when you think about it.
It's interesting, but you do get the feel, like I kind of get it a little bit more because like there wasn't such a thing back then of like, okay, let's do, Street Fighter Alpha or Street Fighter Zero, as it was called in Japan. Like, as time went on, that became a more accepted thing. We got Resident Evil Zero, like that was a thing on the GameCube, and such where it's like, okay, yeah, or like the Origins thing for Baten Kaitos, like that. That's prequels became much more common in media to the point that you had a bunch of things that could signify it that you could choose from. Whereas if it's sort of earlier 90s, maybe they're just, it's like, no, this is the follow-up to that game, leaving the narrative aspect out of it. So it's just got to be 2. By the time you got to Baten Kaitos, though, like, it is really strange that they called it 2 in Japan. That is a fair point.
Oh. So I think what they need is the next Pokemon game should be called Pokemon Origins. But it has no tie to any of the previous Pokemon game. It we'll just call it that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Legends Arceus is a little that way. I mean,
a little bit,
right.
Yeah.
Have the end of it as like is the start of Pokemon Diamond.
Yes, exactly.
Because why? Because no reason.
Well, that Legends Arceus takes place in that region, doesn't it?
What if the start of it?
Diamond and Pearl.
What if the start of it is the end of Pokemon Diamond? But like the character you play as has no relation to the plot of Pokemon Diamond. He just happens across the ending of it.
Yeah, well, the end of it could be the point at E3 where I pick up Pokemon Diamond, basically for no reason, and then never play it. That's what I say.
Yes, there you go. Mm-hmm. Done. Perfect.
I like to think that's like the equivalent of the end of like a, like monster movie, like Q, the Winged Serpent or whatever, where you see the egg at the end. It's that kind of vibe they go for, with John just like dusting off some copy from somewhere and opening it up.
Yep.
And then there's just like a dinosaur squeal for no reason.
All right. Last email. Let's do it. I will read it. Brian writes, Dear RF Anchor, I was wondering what your thoughts are on the ever-changing art style of the Legend of Zelda franchise. I don't know of any other franchise, video game or otherwise, that has deliberately changed its art style so drastically, while its contemporary franchises like Mario and Metroid evolve in both their look and in-game presentations and concept art. Each generation of Zelda games feels more like a contemporary reboot. I'd expect from a franchise like TNMT, that's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, unless you're in the UK. But I would
I think that time has like passed quite a while ago. I mean, it's true for me, but I don't know whether you know this. I'm old.
No, well, we're all old. Our listeners are old too, so I have to make sure they know. But in a much shorter time span, obviously the sequels have shared art style, but such as Majora's Mask and Tears of the Kingdom. And Toon Link was the face of most of the handheld games, being with Four Swords. But even
beginning, maybe. Oh, sorry.
I just say being with Four Swords. Beginning with Four Swords is what he meant. Yeah. But even so, I still can't think of another franchise so willing to experiment with visual motifs with the core material. For me, this willingness to experiment makes rediscovering classic characters and items interesting, with each new iteration in a way that, for most other franchises, haven't done since the transition from 2D to 3D. Yeah? I mean, so like we could just go through the art styles. The NES game, I would say, well, the first NES game and the second one are pretty drastically different, because they're just different styles of game altogether. Link to the Past sets an art style for the Game Boy games.
Sure.
I would say you can make a good argument that Ocarina of Time is, I don't know, would you say it's an evolution of what's coming out, or would you say it's new?
Again, because it's as was hinted at the very end of the question there, about a lot of series had to have certain, by technical necessity, have to do some sort of aesthetic transformation just to go from 2D to 3D, even if you tried as much as you could to like feel like it was still the same world or the same characters. You couldn't avoid it really, could you? You kind of had to have some kind of new aesthetic, like kind of laid down. And certainly, you know, character art wise, it was quite different as well. You know, obviously Link became DiCaprio, basically, but adult, you know, quote unquote adult Link, he's like 14, isn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So yeah, I guess that's a jumping off point, and then that really rolls through, I don't know, Skyward Sword. Through Twilight Princess.
Well, yeah, Twilight Princess obviously is a pretty, you know, clear sort of just iteration on. There's some differences, you know, some kind of points of emphasis. Yeah,
because they saw Lord of the Rings.
Yes, exactly. That certainly is a fair. Again, we've already mentioned this just recently. The sort of a pretty profound effect of, you know, the Jackson brings movies on loads of stuff, not just Nintendo stuff, but also like less likely Nintendo stuff, like where we got Samus fighting Ridley, very much like Gandalf fights the Balrog, like in Metroid Prime 3. So it was, you know, like 4 years after Two Towers at that point or something. But yeah, you know, with that, you know, even if you look at the Oracle games and Minish Cap, there's quite a lot of Ocarina in those games as well, even though, especially Minish Cap, is also drawing on Wind Waker. Like, the Minish Cap is kind of a strange... I think it's a really nice looking game. Certainly much more of a kind of, I think much more stylish than A Link to the Past was on Super Nintendo.
Oh, definitely.
Link to the Past, you know, Link to the Past was an early Super Nintendo game, remember? The Super Famicom version came out in 91. So it was early, and I think it kind of gave it this sort of peculiar utilitarian kind of look, you know, like I have a great deal of affection for it just because of how much I played and loved that game as a small child, but I don't think it's that stylish, and that's what, you know, Minish Cap did. But it actually, as much as you can say, oh well, you know, Minish Cap has got Wind Waker Link in it, it was actually bringing a bunch of characters and stuff from like the 3D games, you know, from a number of the 3D games, like including Ocarina as well as Wind Waker. And yeah, and like I said, the Oracle games, like they incorporate like the Goron designs from Ocarina and Majora's Mask and like some of the other races and stuff. So yeah, that you get like this sort of hybrid aesthetics and all that. Wind Waker is the one that really feels like it's like, no, we are just doing something different that's not really kind of like, let's blend this and that together that already exists. It's like we are decidedly striking out on a new path aesthetically. That was truly kind of uncommon, and you found out some of the reasons why with the reaction to it.
Yeah, you did. Like Wind Waker very clearly draws a lot of inspiration from different things, but one of the things I think that they're most on the nose about is like they show it. They really kind of went for this sort of, like old art, like ancient art kind of look to how these characters are depicted. What you see in, like pre-perspective drawing. Like, go look at the stained glass window effect that they do at the very beginning, or the draw. They do the drawing for the opening. The stained glass is at the end. Like, they're very much trying to like represent this kind of flat art style that was a very common way of depicting things in like, I don't know, what's a good example? Like the Bayeux Tapestry is close, but not quite what I had in mind. Like, they're really trying to make it feel like this is a telling of a legend and how it would be drawn on like a fucking tapestry. And then they turned it into a 3D art style. And that's really fucking neato. And it ends up looking super cool. But yeah, you're right. Like, I very much lived through the Zelda era, which was stupid and nonsense. But I mean, they did make changes based on that feedback they were getting. They took down a little bit of the cartooniness in his face in particular. And it worked. I mean, it's possibly one of the most, if not the most iconic look of Link there is at this point. I hate using that phrase, but like, it's persevered even though they haven't made a game in that style in 10 plus years.
Right. Like, he gets, in Smash Brothers twice. Like, you're not gonna see, Twilight Princess and Breath of the Wild Link, both in Smash. Like, that's a very much like a distinct character that kind of branched out. Like younger than Link seems to be portrayed in most games. So it's different in a number of ways. I just feel like I think that mostly the style of Zelda has evolved in a kind of mostly linear way outside of this blip and outside of the jumping back and forth between 2D and 3D. The thing is that Zelda is one of the few franchises still going on that originated from 2D, but also like from 8-bit when you had to use your imagination a little bit, to interpret what you were.
Link's pink hair. Link's pink hair from
Link to the Past. Yeah, that's really strange though, because the character art just did not have the pink hair, and yet you can't really put it down to it being like a miscoloured sprite thing, because I mean, you did have like Yoshi's brown arms in Super Mario World. Like, I think that's just a mistake because like it just doesn't fit the character art. But the bunny is pink as well.
Yes.
When he goes into the dark world and, he's forced to change shape into something that reflects his heart or whatever. That's pink. So it's clearly like, no, like a choice. Like, there's no way they made that mistake across multiple sprites. Or, I don't know, maybe it's the bunny's fault. Maybe they thought, we like the idea of a pink bunny. Yeah, but how could we justify it? Oh, well, what if his hair was pink?
And maybe they just wanted to make sure that the player always knew where they were on the screen. And so, like, well, it's got green clothes, but, the enemies, the guards also wear green. Also, like, most of the time you're in grass. But definitely. The pink hair, now that's distinctive. Like, none of the enemies are wearing this. So, it could just be something like that. But then, like you think, utilitarian reason.
Update the character art and give him the pink hair. I don't know whether someone's like, no, we're not putting, pink hair on the box, which Link does appear on the box of the Japanese game. Obviously, the North American box art is just the, going with the motif that was established for the NES games of golden with a shield, a crest or whatever. But in Japan, it's like a picture of the Master Sword, in the forest, but with some character art of Link slapped on it as well. And he's got brown hair. So it's, that is really quite odd, to be honest, but it is the kind of thing that went on much more in the 90s where it just wasn't as closely coordinated, I guess, all these things.
I think the other thing that why Nintendo was willing to let Zelda play more, I think it's probably got something to do with the team that runs the Zelda show. I mean, Aonuma, I'm sure at this point has a lot of freedom to do what he wants to do, because he's proven himself over and over again, and he's fairly high up in the company at this point. And I suspect they probably have interest in doing that. I mean, I remember when they showed off Skyward Sword, and they were talking about how, they use impressionist imagery and like how all this art style, like what that art style meant to them. I think some of it is they just have the interest in doing it, and some of it is they have the freedom to do it because they have a history of success, but also they're not carrying, and it goes back to our first email, they're not carrying the weight of being Nintendo's mascot. Like, Link isn't showing up at the Tokyo Olympics pre-ceremony with the Prime Minister wearing a Link hat coming out of a warp pipe. Or I guess it wouldn't make sense in that context.
Yeah, you'd be like warping in one of those like crystals from Ocarina of Time or something.
Yeah, like that didn't happen. Link might get a world at the theme park, but he wasn't the first one to get one. Link wasn't the one that was the big featured mobile game from Apple. Like, these things all happen because that's the mascot.
And so, again, as we've said, the obvious kind of counterpoint or, point of reference, I guess, of comparison is with Mario and what sort of how difficult it was to even get something as like a Super Mario Brothers Wonder, seemingly, where you play with it a little bit more, a little bit more stylistically and kind of, rather than rigidly like, this is what he looks like for everything, and therefore, this is how he's going to look even in side scrollers, whatever it might be. So yeah, it's a very different experience from that. I mean, I guess the other thing that might play into it a little bit is just the fact that, each Link, well, not necessarily each Link, but certainly like many of the games, it's like however many hundreds of years on, or hundreds of years in the past, or it's a different timeline, or it doesn't really matter is the real answer. Right. It's a different Link. He's called Link, or you used to be able to call him whatever you wanted, but, it's a different character, basically, that somehow embodies like the general traits of, the hero chosen by the Triforce or whatever, but, it's not really the same character. It's not meant to be the same person that's like, keeps going on these adventures most of the time. There are, like, I guess, we generally assumed, like, Zelda 2, was the Link, the same person, just grown up a bit and stuff. But for the most part, obviously with Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, like it's really kind of meant to be the same person as the previous game. But again, they played down the ties so much, like I don't know
sure did
how much that really matters. But the point is, like, generally speaking, you go from, especially like the ones that have like different worlds, Link is different along with it. And I mean, it's kind of interesting, even like something like a remake, like the Link's Awakening remake, where, they could, I guess, have kept it a bit more in the look of Link Between Worlds, for instance. But they didn't. First of all, that's not its strongest suit. It's aesthetically, like,
it's ugly.
The 3D effect was cool, but the whole, so I get using polygonal characters to that end rather than like doing some kind of like pixel art version. But yeah, like,
sure.
It was very much like New Super Mario Brothers ethos comes to Zelda, wasn't it? Actually,
yeah.
As an interpretation of A Link to the Past. But yeah, what they went for with the Link's Awakening remake was much more kind of, even though, again, like fundamentally, it's probably not that different, but a bit of a Super Mario Brothers Wonder thing of just like, let's give it a bit more of a sort of style in that, going for that more explicit, like, he's like a little porcelain doll now. And,
yes,
everything's this small kind of scale, that kind of goes along with the kind of surreal and whimsical, nature.
Almost a crafted world thing.
Yeah. No, so, even something like that as a remake of an existing game, there was a little bit of like, how can we differentiate this aesthetically? And also, I guess the default option otherwise might have been to bring back Wind Waker Link. Because right, like that was what they did for Triforce Heroes, for instance, but they didn't do that either. I guess maybe they felt like, well, Wind Waker Link, and even though he's appeared in many games other than Wind Waker, is almost his own character, as again he is his own character in Smash. So we don't want to do that either. So you get a sort of new variant, and that gets its own amiibo and all that kind of stuff. Like, so I think that's part of it, is just the fact that the games themselves, it's almost like each time there's a different if it's a version of Hyrule or it's some other world, like in the case of Majora's Mask or Link's Awakening, it's like Link and the aesthetic can be different to reflect the difference in the world, which is really the star of every Zelda game for the most part.
Yeah. I do wonder, Xenoblade obviously has some freedom here. Like, they've played with their art style in remakes of the same game. Shulk looks nothing like Shulk from the first time we saw Shulk with his melted ass face.
Well, there's a clear kind of line of Xenoblade and X where they had that kind of the facial style, and which obviously was even a little bit different with Wii Xenoblade because the resolution, was not as high as it was on Wii U. So that's where it really kind of ended up looking a bit melted, indistinct, right? As a result, where you go in for a more detailed kind of look, a less kind of stock anime kind of look to the faces. So they got more subtle features, but the tech wasn't really kind of there to support that. And then with Wii U, I think it was, it came across better. Because it was a higher definition, but then obviously when they get to Xenoblade 2, they decide to go with a different aesthetic from both of those, and then it's changed since Xenoblade 2, but that's clearly the center point, I guess, that it's worked from since.
Even when Shulk makes his way to Smash before the remake, well, not 3DS, but not before the 3DS remake. The 3DS remake's pretty faithful to Wii. Before the Switch remake, they had changed his art style pretty dramatically. Like he evokes Shulk from the Wii game, but he looks quite different. And then in the Wii U game, they've touched him up even more to sort of move him towards the berry center that's laid. I mean, not all the way to Xenoblade 2, because that's just not possible. But closer to that point of reference than he starts. And then, but 2 and 3, they've gone quite far, and 2 is obviously trying to look like a cartoon, and then 3, they've really tried to put more detail on the models. So kind of picking back up the detail from Xenoblade 1, but really focusing more on, rather than just all the items that you're wearing being represented on your character and them looking very stupid, having different looks based on your class, but just lots of detail, lots of facial animation and all that stuff. But it is evolved, and I think it's. I mean, Odyssey is kind of a weird game where they played with Mario a lot more than usual. Yeah,
again, I think the whole concept was said about sort of with Zelda, it's like, okay, we can have a different kind of Link and a different aesthetic because the world is different. Well, Odyssey gave you a bunch of different worlds that were very deliberately this is not Super Mario Sunshine. This is not meant to be one place that all connects together. It's the same island or whatever. It's we go into all places that have completely different kinds of color palettes and every, what is it? It's the food themed kingdom that has the really kind of color clashy graphics.
Yes.
I hadn't really thought about it much.
It's pink and green.
When I saw, is it Penny's Big Breakaway? The game by the Sonic Mania people.
It's very ugly.
It's that it's like a whole game of that kingdom from Super Mario Odyssey.
Yeah, it turns out that's really unpleasant to look at for extended periods of time.
But obviously at the same time, it's the first kingdom is just this sort of, lush grass and waterfalls with a T-Rex in it, and then obviously you get New Donk and all that, and the semi-realistic dragon fight, and it is all over the place, but very, very deliberately so, very consciously so, and again, quite a little bit of a departure, you've got to say, from because even the concept of Galaxy, and then obviously Galaxy 2, gave them a lot to play with there in terms of all these weird little planets off in the space. It could be anything, right? But you know, like, I think there's still more uniformity to it than Odyssey in the first game. And then in the second game, it's, you know, it felt like they just got notes, which would just like make it look more like regular Mario, make it more blue skies and, you know, green lands and stuff, because those were the games that were selling. Whereas Odyssey, they were clearly just like, nah, like, make it as, like, discordant as you like. Basically, that's going to be part of the appeal, part of selling the notion that you're traveling to a bunch of different places.
Okay, cool. All right. We'll take a break. Oh, Yoshi. We totally missed. Yoshi's had, like, 5 art styles.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, but Kirby as well. But I mean, that's the
Kirby,
thing.
yeah.
With those games, I feel like it's very much a case of like they feel like first of all they have the latitude to do it, because maybe it's like there's not such a risk of generating some sort of vicious backlash the way there was with the Toon Shaded Link and whatnot, but also to differentiate the games a bit, because the problem, you know, say for instance with Yoshi's Woolly World, which is a very nice game, I like it a lot, and I think it's definitely the best of the games that follow the Yoshi's Island template. But if it didn't have that very distinctive look, the risk of conflation with the, you know, what I would describe as lesser Yoshi's Island DS and Yoshi's New Island would be even more severe than it already is. So, like, there's a need when you've got like all these products. Especially, I mean, Kirby, there's so much Kirby going on, right? Like, it's just like...
Our biannual Kirby releases.
Certainly over the years, that's been true. It helps to have games that are going to say, okay, well, now it's going to be, you know, because even in like the Super Nintendo era, you could have, you know, Kirby Superstar look one way, and then you could have Kirby Dream Land 3 have a hand-drawn, more Yoshi's Island style look. I think it's just helps like differentiate the games and the products as being separate and not just like, oh, it's another one of those. Haven't I already played this? Whatever, you know, like that kind of thing.
The Mega Man effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good example, because we did end up with like 5 or 6 Mega Man games back to back. So
they kind of all look the same.
Well, because they were all the same.
Yeah.
Well, that's not true, because Mega Man 1 to 2 is pretty wildly different. But
they improved, but then they stuck with that 2 style, and then they stuck with it on the Game Boy as well. Like, it was very. I guess there's a reason why it's a pretty iconic sprite that it went back to for 9 and 10.
Yeah, but then for X, they continually made improvements to the X look as the technology advanced, and then as it devanced when they went 3D and the games looked like shit. Boy, those 2 games look so bad. But yeah, okay. Let's go ahead and call it for email there. We're gonna take a break. We come back, we do a little bit of new business, so please stay tuned for that. But if you want to send us your questions during the break, you've got about 12 seconds. So you could send them to rfn@nintendoworldreport.com.
That's probably how we ended up with the one of the rabbit coming out of the toilet.
Look, I'm giving them... Now they've got like 25 seconds, so now they owe us at least 3 sentences. So get your questions in before the music stops playing. It's like musical chairs. Just press send wherever you're at in your email.
We'll give you an inch. Please do not take a mile.
They're going to take... They're going to take a mile.
You wait until you're aware that Nintendo's going to pull the Mario Cross Rabbids license, you know, because maybe it didn't sell well enough or whatever. They're not getting enough money out of it. The third Rabbids tactical game is going to be Rabbids Cross Ghoulies. The
oh god,
absolutely classic movie from the 80s that featured a green puppet coming out of a toilet, and you know, the gameplay will be just as good though. So I mean, it'd probably sell better.
Yeah, also immortalized
I got that confused with Chuds.
Oh, but yes, CHUD, which was an acronym. It was a CHUD. It stood for something. But yeah, also, I think it was coming out of
Cannibalistic Humanoid Underground Dwellers. Okay?
Oh, well
I hate
played,
that you know
John. That is,
I hate that you know this.
That is unironically extremely cred, as far as I'm concerned. Very well played.
Ghoulies come out of your toilet, Chuds come out of your manholes.
Manhole cover, yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought you were saying Ghoulies, and you were talking about Rare's.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying. Immortalized, immortalized grab.
We managed to make Microsoft publish a game with the word testicles in it. We did it.
Does that qualify as passive aggressive, or is that not right? I'm just trying to,
I think you've crossed into just regular aggressive.
Yeah, but just a really kind of puerile, kind of crappy version of aggression. I guess. We need a snappier way to sort of sum up that kind of conduct.
Can we call it like stupid aggressive, where like you've done something very stupid, but in an aggressive way? This is the equivalent of my college job where I was working in a high school, which is a bad combination. A kid being pulled out, put his head through the trophy case to show someone a lesson. Mostly himself, because I think he gave himself a concussion. But hey, it was extreme stupid aggression.
Also, since some of our email writers are very fond of sequel subtitles, naming no names, Chud, I think the sequel to Chud has the subtitle Bud the Chud. I mean, that's got to be right.
I am discovering this right now. It's amazing.
Bud the Chud. Wow.
Having seen Chuds back in my era of... I want to be clear. My bad movie group watched over 500 movies. Man, we did that. We went nuts, and we never got around to Chud having a sequel. Yeah. So, like that's causing me trauma.
A couple of teenagers break into a secret government science lab and steal a frozen corpse for a high school prank, as you do.
Yeah,
and accidentally awaken the corpse, which turns out to be a Chud. Ironically named Bud, who goes on a killing spree.
Why is it ironic?
How is that ironic? I know, I was looking at how is that ironic?
Because he's nobody's Bud. He's on a killing spree.
Who named it? Alanis Morissette. I mean, it's just, I'm not buying it.
I think it's like his name being Bud, like Buddy, when he's actually a serial killer. I think that there's close enough to irony that you can get away with it. I question though, like who steals a corpse for a high school prank?
Right.
And
from a secret government lab.
Yeah, like, how did they know it was there if it's a secret lab? Then, of course, what was the? I need to know what was the purpose of the prank. What were they going to do with the corpse? And that makes me upset because this is going to result in me one day watching Chud 2 Bud the Chud. I'm going to hate all of you for it.
Chud is such a terrible.
So Chud is in the title twice.
Yeah, I always love it when there is something's in the name twice. So that's plus for me for that.
I actually think Chud 2 Bud would be funnier.
That might have run into like Budweiser, like, so we don't want anybody thinking that it's associated with our product, so we're going to force you to put Chud in the name twice.
So this goes back to our previous. It's back to our previous conversation of don't put a number in the title, just call it Bud the Chud as the sequel.
It's true. Yeah.
Like it didn't need the Chud 2 part. You could just excise that and just go with Bud the Chud and you're done. It's got like a nice ring to it. It doesn't have Chud in the title twice, which is important. I just why are we back? Why are we talking about fucking Chuds? Like this isn't even the worst one of these movies. Like the Gremlins is a thing. Let's make more like this that we saw.
No, I said Ghoulies has got to be up there for the worst one of those, right?
It's bad. It's just facile. Like it's just.
But there's always worse. There's whatever you've seen. There's something worse. Like it's probably
Troll 2.
Troll 2 words is I thought I'd never say on the podcast, but I'm probably being uncharitable to Ghoulies there.
Like I'm pretty sure Trolls 2 is or Troll 2, whatever they call it, is the bottom.
That's
of the
part. Yeah, that's what I've heard. I've never seen it myself, but it's very infamous, isn't it? That one.
I have seen it. It is a nightmare. Do not watch it. Do not watch it ironically. Do not watch it for fun. It is on MGM Plus for some reason.
But he is out to watch it. Yes, thank you. I always know you've got our welfare at heart.
I'm just amused that MGM's like, no, we want to be associated with this piece of shit. Put it on our service.
Now,
you were expressing.
Amazon?
Yeah, I was going to say you were expressing puzzlement at Amazon strategies earlier on. I suppose this would fall under that umbrella, James.
Well, so now I'm thinking about his Hobgoblin's worse. It's also really bad. It's really bad. No, it's still Troll 2. I think Troll 2 is just dumber because people get turned into green goo. I think that's what the cut point. Oh man, now I'm just seeing more like this. Apparently there's a related film called Who's Your Caddy, and I'm just, nope, we're not doing that. I give up. I give the fuck up. It's got a 2.3 rating on IMDb, which is historically very forgiving. Jesus Christ. All right. Run away. All right, that's going to do it for this segment. You could send your recommendations, films to watch that will make me upset to rfn@nintendoworldreport.com. That's rfn@nintendoworldreport.com. There's a non-zero chance whatever crazy movie you think you're the only person who's ever seen, I've already seen it. Again, our list got up to like 500. We saw a lot of shit that when I mentioned, people are like, I've never even heard of that movie. And then come back and go, dear God, how did you survive that? So, yeah, send them. I don't care.
It's about
Questions, comments,
1,000
thoughts.
hours, James, just right down the tubes for the most part.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. But like, we watched the whole Howling series in a night.
Oh, wow.
But look.
And the first movie is the best one, and it's terrible.
Yeah, exactly. Because it goes down. There's a scene where they are marsupials and a human has a pouch.
That's the third one. Convenient enough called the marsupials. Because I have not seen the third one, or the second one, or any of the other. I've only seen the first one. That's an okay werewolf movie. I don't think it's terrible. Yeah. I think most werewolf movies are bad that I've seen. Yeah. So some of it's just relatively. But yeah, what happens after that, I think is apparently it's not good.
So since we're talking about sequel titles, I have to do this one. Howling 2's subtitle.
Your sister is a werewolf.
Yeah, Howling 2: Your Sister is a Werewolf, which is one of those movies that very thinly is hiding the director's fetish, which is BDSM. And Christopher Lee delivers that line, "Your sister is a werewolf," in the most amazing way possible, and you think that man is a serious actor. Allegedly.
So, but if you're a British actor of a certain age, that was a lot of what they did. Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, Donald Pleasance,
so
like they basically just took whatever was offered to them, and then they did a professional job. That's what they did. Yeah. You know,
or your movie has a deficit of not respect, but
gravitas,
credibility,
or
credibility. Yeah,
sure,
exactly. So the episode title right now is 898. Your sister is a werewolf.
Basically, it's like the exact opposite of Harrison Ford, right? It's just like Harrison Ford is just like, he will, if he thinks it's shit, he will deliberately do it badly, just so the audience knows that he thinks that it's rubbish. Like he wants to distance himself. Whereas like your sort of Donald Pleasances of the world in Halloween 5 or whatever, he's just like, no, he's gonna do a professional job. He's gonna act. He's still gonna be poor because it's not, it's a poor script, but he'll do the job. He'll act it like it's good.
Howling 2 is actually very watchable. Howling 3 is a fucking nightmare. Don't do it.
Also an MGM Plus.
Actually, I don't know that it is, to be honest. I know Howling 2's on all the free streaming services.
The thing is, James, the more you say don't do it, the more I want to do it. Like I'm actually like my interest increases.
Oh, it's on Amazon. Great.
Oh, wow.
You would. No one will enjoy watching Howling 3. You just can't. It's not enjoyable.
I mean, I would think with Howling 3, you could probably watch like the first half hour of it and get the gist.
No, because that's before the pouches scene.
Oh, all right.
The pouches scene actually made people in our movie group, keep in mind, these people who've watched hundreds of bad horror films and sci-fi, go like, I cannot continue, and stop watching. Like, there was a breaking point for some people. Mm-hmm. But Howling 2 is just dumb 80s bullshit. You can watch that.
Yeah,
that's very
Howling 2,
watchable.
that's from like 81 or something, isn't that? Like
85.
Really? Okay.
And there's a rock concert in the middle of it, because again, 85.
85, right.
The whole time Christopher Lee is skulking around trying to kill the main witch. Or, I don't know. Is she a vampire? Is she a witch? It's a very confusing film. It's a very confusing film. So yeah, go watch Howling 2. Pause this podcast, go watch Howling 2, and at about 1:38 start it, and the podcast will sync up to the action on screen. It's my promise to you. So, on that, we're gonna finally take this break. You've now had time to write us a real email, so your excuses are lost, at rfn@nintendoworldreport.com. So please stay tuned. We are back with some new-ish business. I don't know. I have the newest business, and I'm going to go quick. So I came home from work today. I was in the office, and I opened up my computer to get ready for the show, and I saw that I had like 7 unread messages on Discord, which meant either one of two things. Something really stupid happened, and I was getting tagged in it in the NWR Discord. Or something really stupid happened, and Seren was telling me about it in detail. It was the second. So the demo for, I'm going to get the exact name here, SaGa Emerald Beyond came out today. Now I say the demo. I already lied to you. 3 demos for SaGa Emerald Beyond came out because the absolute big brain geniuses at Square Enix have released platform exclusive demos. Their word, not mine, where the demo on PC, the demo on Switch, and the demo on PS5 are different characters you play as in the game. Why would you put your development resources into making 3 distinct demos? You're a psychopath, is probably the first answer. 2, you didn't spend the money on making the game, so you decided to do this instead. That's the actual answer, because I have never had an experience like this demo in a very long time. The aesthetic. So I once said that the 3D characters in this game looked like characters from a Namco Bandai fighting game, and I stand by that, but the 3D character models show up so infrequently, that's almost irrelevant. I would say that the prevailing art style I have from this is Xbox 360 indie, Xbox Live indie game arcade. You know, like when they had segregated the indie games off from the regular Xbox arcade games. Specifically that one publisher who kept making 3D poser models with egregiously large breasts. That is the aesthetic of this game. Specifically that. That exactly. Which is a hyper-specific aesthetic, and I appreciate that their willingness to research that style and really make sure it's represented in this fucking nightmare of a product. But even from the demo, I'm just going to give you a couple things, and then I'm going to encourage you to go experience this demo as many ways as you can, because there are platform-exclusive versions. Notes, I played this demo entirely on the call with these gentlemen. The call had been going for about 24 minutes when I turned it off. My save state was at 37 minutes. Where did those extra, 15 minutes come from? No one knows. The clock fucked up that quickly. I'm legitimately impressed. All my main character has done is walk around a map, which is 2D images sitting on a 3D space. Some of them are moving around. And she walks up to one of the images, presses A picture of a cat comes up on the screen with what breed of cat it is. Most of the time it's not accurate to the picture. And then I go back to the map and do it again. Seren noted to me that the dialogue in the PS5 version she played felt like it was written by ChatGPT. I would say that is charitable. Based on what I experienced in the Switch game, this is truly machine translated or written by a space alien. Those are literally the only options. If it was not machine translated, I encourage our government to go track down the localization team, because there is a non-human on board. And
can we have a solution that's kind of a combination of the two, like the Mars Attacks Martians running around with that thing that says "We are your friends"? It's exactly that machine, but it is space aliens.
Yeah. I mean that's entirely plausible, but I strongly encourage whatever the relevant alphabet soup agency is to go investigate the localization team here, because there is explicitly not like a non-native speaker. There's someone who doesn't understand the constructs of Earth involved in this dialogue. It is fascinating. Fascinating's correct. All of the character interactions are just 3D poser models that are just static, and occasionally they'll like repose them, and it'll jump to that. Like honestly, it looks like one of the games that has hentai in the title on the Switch eShop. It's that dire. It's that dire. But my favorite is one of the times they had a character posed, and it was just like generic child, but their finger was under their nose like they were doing a mustache while they were making fun of the witch for claiming that she's a witch. That's it. That's all it was. This game is fucked up. You should go see this demo. This feels like a sweary game, but on accident. I don't even know how you do that. So, welcome. This has all the charm of whatever Sweary's Xbox One game is that got canceled after the first episode, but none of the intention. And about 1/8 the technical execution. You should go look. I will not recommend you buy this game based on the demo. I will strongly recommend you see this demo because you will not believe it. And that's it. That's all I'm going to say about it. Like, it is difficult to describe otherwise. So enjoy that. Go pause what you're doing, gather the family around, and go play the demo of SaGa Emerald Beyond on Switch. And then again on PS5. And then again on PC. Just show it fun for the whole family. Greg, what have you been up to?
Sure, yeah. Well, as I somewhat expected, I went a bit further after last week F-Zero Maximum Velocity for GBA had been out for about an hour. So yeah, I did play it a bit more than that. And in fact, I ended up first thing I did was just run through all the cups on standard, which didn't expect to be terribly difficult because it's only the middle difficulty of the ones that are available to you at first. So then, I kicked it up to expert, and certainly, that was a fair bit more challenging. But I guess, even though it was absolutely ages ago, I have played the game before, so I had a bit of a, leg up, and it didn't take me too long to, complete all those cups, which then unlocks some cars in the process and also unlocks the master difficulty, which I remember being very, very challenging on GBA back in the day. So that is probably going to be a step too far, I would think, for me. But it was still fun running through all the cups. Again, like the track design and stuff, I think is kind of interesting. It has some sort of elements that you wouldn't have necessarily seen in the original F-Zero. Obviously, it's mostly restricted to the same kind of stuff because it is, that Mode 7 type, so you can't do the same things that F-Zero X or GX would do with the variable terrain and, half pipes, full pipes, all this great corkscrews, all that kind of weird stuff. But, it does some different things with like branching kind of layouts where it's like, well, maybe this would be the best way to go on the first lap when you haven't got a boost, but you might go the other way on the second lap once you do. And, they do some interesting things with it. And it is a lot of it is based around just, how well you can take corners and avoid mistakes. So it's got a sort of purity, to the racing that, maybe, some of the other games where it might be like more exciting or kind of flashy, do sort of lose some of that in the process, if you like. But I did, with the whole thing about NWR's 25th anniversary last week and all that, I'd gone back and I'd read Johnny's review, for the game back in July of 01. And this was Johnny's assessment of the difficulty, which maybe, like I said, is more kind of a fair assessment than mine because, I did play the thing to absolute death all those years ago. So let's get one thing out of the way. This game is hard, extremely hard. Only the most skilled, devoted, hardcore, insane players will be able to clear every cup on expert and master difficulties. This sick amount of challenge.
It's sick, bro.
I don't think it's in the positive connotation of sick. I think it's just like sick puppy, sick bastard type. It's is a double-bladed sword any way you look at it. Maximum velocity, definitely not a game you'll beat within a few days. So, yeah, there you go. That's the verdict from Johnny. You get 7.5, by the way. He was less warm on it than some of the other reviewers at the time.
This was maximum velocity, right?
Yes.
So that this also has the weird subtitle shit because they couldn't call it GBA because that would be weird.
Yeah, they said they did do that in Japan. They did say full Game Boy Advance, but yeah, like the other thing was, I guess, like wasn't there something that they called F-Zero 2 like on the Satellaview or something?
Yeah, they did.
So
they could.
Maybe that, I mean, shouldn't really have been like
because nobody in the US knew what the Satellaview was.
Yeah, and I guess the other complicated thing is just like, well, you've got F-Zero X, that was kind of interesting. They didn't call it F-Zero 64. They called it X. So I guess it's like, okay, well, how does it relate to the, are you thinking at this point, because the original was like 10 years old at this point. So it's like more people going to be thinking about X, and, you wouldn't call it X2 because it's really quite misleading because it's so much more like the other one, the original one and stuff.
What if you called it F-Zero 2, your sister is a werewolf?
After Bud the Chud, I would prefer myself.
F-Zero 2, Bud the F-Zero. Done. We did it.
But, they just sort of sidestepped it. And they sidestepped a lot of the trappings. Like, it doesn't have, as we already mentioned, like the Captain Falcon, kind of Samurai Gora, like the core cast or the core cars and stuff. And it's kind of interesting how they differentiate the cars in the crafts in this, because they've got some different attributes. Like, you've got the specific acceleration top speed curves, like in the original F-Zero, rather than where you can kind of pick it yourself in F-Zero X. But they've got specific stats for like how fast your top speed is while boosting, but also how long the boost lasts. And some different sort of characteristics than you would have had from the cars in the original F-Zero, or indeed, the way that those cars have been preserved now and brought back in F-Zero 99. And so, yeah, like some of the cars, the boost does last for ages. And in others, it's just crazy fast. So you just like activate and you're like, whoa, slow down. Like, you just like really can't control this stuff. So yeah, you really need to think about what kind of car is going to fit for a particular cup, when you're doing a Grand Prix and all that. It's quite particular, you know what I mean? Like, it's clearly patterned on the Super Nintendo game, but especially with like some of the characters and the track themes, like some of them don't seem very F-Zero. Like, there was one cup which had multiple tracks based on a farm. I mean, that's like working Mario Kart side of the street, isn't it?
Yeah, Mario should just show up and punch somebody in the teeth for that.
You don't get to race here. It's my town.
Also, I like the idea of cows existing in the F-Zero universe.
Yeah, I don't know what they're farming on. It might be like that weird farm at the start of Blade Runner 2049 or something. I don't know, but it's just like struck me as we're doing a farm on the F-Zero. So I had totally forgotten about that, but obviously the stuff like track theming and all that, it's a bit incidental when it's going past this fast at such a low resolution, and that GBA was and all that. It is a little bit harder to like pass everything that's going on in front of you at high speed than in like Super Nintendo F-Zero. But you do have the luxury, for me especially, because I probably mess with this a little bit on Ambassador, like with 3DS, but not much. So this is really the first time I run through all the cups, like with, on Switch OLED. That's a huge nice screen compared to, launch day GBA. I mean, that was probably a big part of what contributed to what Johnny was saying about the difficulty there. Because, like I said, the graphics at that resolution are not that distinct, but I mean, it wasn't like a Circle of the Moon thing where it was just too dark, but still. That screen was, even when you kind of didn't have specifically like too dark imagery, it was pretty fucking lousy, especially by any kind of modern standards. But even back then, there were better portable device screens around, and they would be, relatively shortly, really, with like the SP and stuff. So yeah, I think, maybe if you've kind of let it pass you by in the past, it might be worth having a look, because it is, it's a little bit of its own beast, you know, but obviously it's going to be of interest to F-Zero fans, and obviously you might just find it more playable than if you last time you looked at it was back on the original hardware. But the only other thing I'll say is I got in this week a physical copy. I actually imported a couple of games from Japan that I felt like there was a pretty high confidence level won't get localized, even though, you know, you can't write anything off altogether. You get some pretty unlikely things, don't you, these days? But I got the Mamida no Bakaru, the Good Feel Goemon kind of tribute game, and the Game Center CX 1+2 replay, whatever they sort of classify it as, compilation. So yeah, again, a little bit of with the Mamida no Bakaru, it's a bit of a gamble on just how much I get out of that without it being localized. And, you know, it seems like it's got some other things that you could say about certain Good Feel games about, you know, skewing younger, not being terribly challenging, but I do love Goemon. So, you know, and I've seen some, you know, kind of interesting impressions of it. So I thought it was worth a shot. And then, you know, with Retro Game Challenge, as it was the first DS game was localized here, based on, you know, the TV show Game Center CX in Japan. That was, it's not the most ruthlessly utilitarian purchase I've ever made, I have to say, because I mean, you know, I have access to the 2 DS games still. I don't own the first one. That is actually Johnny's copy, which he sent me. I guess he lent it to me, and I have not returned it in, must be like 15 years. So,
and now you're telling on yourself.
Yeah, I know. I've done it before as well. I'm sorry, but it's, you know, that was a really cool game, and that was in itself like a really unlikely localization because it's such a deep, involved localization. Because the whole thing is, you know, a bunch of faux retro games kind of stitched together with this idea of recreating, you know, what it was like to be a kid in Japan as the Famicom was, you know, gaining in popularity, and kind of going on that journey of like what kinds of games were popular through the mid-80s, and like the games magazines that were coming out and offering tips on there and all this kind of stuff. So, you know, to try and get all that in there, with, you know, having like, I think it was like the Ziff Davis journalists at the time, you know, people that would have been on oneup.com and EGM and all that. Like, I think they had them kind of standing in for the what they did in Japan, where it was, you know, imitating stuff like Famitsu, I guess. And, you know, just the large amount of text involved and all that. Like, it was a really, you know, kind of, amazing that it happened. And then, of course, when there was a sequel in Japan, it didn't happen. And I just imported that one on DS back in the day. So I really did enjoy playing through the second one, even though you lost a lot of that context. And, you know, and so, yeah, the richer kind of experience of all these little sort of touches and gags, you know, almost like the way, I mean, some of it works into the gameplay. Like one of the games I just did in the first game, like, the sort of first constituent, game, because you can pick either first retro game, well, you know, Game Center CX game, second Game Center CX game, and then you've got a separate thing, which is like some of the new ones they've put in there. Like, I had a little mess around with the one that's very much like a Kunio-kun game, you know, like River City Ransom, but with Arino, like, kind of leaving the sort of office where they filmed the show and then just like beating up people outside. You know, it's pretty cute and stuff. But yeah, I was just working through some of the constituent games in the first part, as it were, and like there's a bit where like you start playing the shoot 'em up Star Prince, right, which is pretty clearly patterned on Star Force, which then kind of inspired the Star Soldier series. And like at first you're just like playing, and you have to like keep pressing the fire button to, you know, kind of get as many shots off as possible. But then once you've done the first couple of challenges, it's like, oh, someone's released a turbo controller, so now you can just hold Y and you don't have to, worry about having to press it really fast anymore, which is, just a really cute little touch. Like, so some of these are things that are not even just like, there's way more stuff like that woven into all the fake magazines and all that, but some of them just manifest themselves in gameplay like that. And so, yeah, it's like, could I have just gone back to the DS games and played them again like that? I could, certainly. I mean, again, I think it is nice to, especially like just the first game, Cosmic Gate, I think it's called, which is very much Galaga. Like, it is nice having that on a bigger screen because like some of the shots are like really small and kind of hard to see on something like that on, especially, I guess maybe, I mean, I never had a DSi XL, but, maybe, that would have been okay, but yeah, I didn't have one of those. So, there's definitely some advantages in that regard, but also just, kind of just something I wanted to own physically because I really enjoy those. And especially like the second one's got some cool stuff there because they get to like a 16-bit game that's kind of influenced by, Demon's Crest or Ghouls and Ghosts and stuff. Like there's some really nice, and that Star Prince is pretty solid, faux Famicom shooter as well. There's some that were not as well regarded, like I think the rally racing game, which comes up twice, where it's kind of like taking the piss out of like product placement variants. Like there was that All Night Super Mario Brothers like variant in Japan in the mid 80s. Like it's basically that for the racing game, but the problem is that the value of the gag there was diminished by the fact that a lot of the reviewers of the retro game shows didn't really like the racing game, so they didn't want to see it again. No, it's nice to have, and also this is all made possible by the miracle of Japanese monetary policy. Really, is the MVP and all this, because it is just like they were on a bit of a discount, about 4,000 yen, which at the current exchange rate, even with everything the British government has done to assault the value of sterling over the years, it's not much more than 20 quid. Now, by the time you have shipping and tax and all that, it's a fair bit more, but still, and especially like that Retro Game Challenge compilation, it just came out. It's new, essentially. And Mamoru no Bakaru is not very, it's been around for a couple of months or so. So yeah, it's compared to, I can remember like probably when I had my Japanese Wii, it was probably more like 140 yen to sterling. And now it's like 190.
Jeez.
So I can only imagine, like in dollar terms, like it's improved even more, in that time, because the sterling's lost quite a lot of its value against the dollar in those years. So,
but I mean, at one point the yen was under 100. So yeah.
Yeah, it's it's not that much, especially because like you can get things off the eShop in Japan and all that, and just the amount of stuff that does get localized really isn't very much stuff that I'm like, I want to import a physical copy of this. But these two kind of both kind of came along at a similar time, and especially being able to kind of bundle together, save a bit on shipping. It's just like, nah, you know what, I'll do it.
Cool. Yeah, I'm a little jealous. Like I've got Retro Game Challenge 1 and 2, so to a certain degree, like I'm good. But like being able to play them on Switch would be nice. It's a shame that we never got 2 localized, and we'll definitely never get this collection localized.
It doesn't seem likely, does it? I mean, the biggest thing, I guess, is just that even because the first one did get localized, but it took time. So there's still loads of import FAQs for me to work if there's something that I don't understand, like why am I not completing this challenge or something, I can consult with that. And that's going to, it does seem like they've made some of them more forgiving, actually. Like, when I've read like a game FAQ and it said like, oh, you've got to get this many points. And then I've been doing the challenge and I've only reached like 75% of that. And then it's cleared. So I think they've maybe tinkered with it a little bit, but probably not much. I think the substance of the challenges remains the same for each individual game. Cause that's really to kind of move on to the next game in the sequence in this faux history of, the Famicom era. You've got to do 4 kind of games, and it might sound a little bit now to people who hadn't experienced these back in the day, like NES Remix. And there's a reason for that, because it's the same developer. Indy Zero, but in this case, with a much more kind of elaborate, kind of wrapping and, with games that didn't actually exist. So they had to kind of but they clearly patterned on things that did exist, so yeah, it's something that I knew. And then with the second game, I had to work through that with an FAQ, in some cases very robotically, like when they get to the Famicom Detective Club game, that's unplayable without language skills. So you really have to look at something that's like, okay, do this command, now do that command. But it wasn't too unwieldy, and you got like Guardia Quest, the Dragon Quest, right? Kind of stand in as well. But that definitely Famicom Detective Club was the riff on that. That was the toughest one to get through, but it was doable. I did it, and to be fair, if you're talking about recreating people's experience in childhood, this was my experience in childhood, bumbling my way through Japanese games. Like, that's what I did as a child. So in some ways, this is more authentic than when I played the localized version in the late aughts.
Now you just got me looking at import prices.
It kind of reminds me of what was that game with the fox that came out recently? A Zelda-like, that's a Souls-like. Also,
I want to say minute.
So one word.
Yeah, that's different Zelda-like.
Anyway, like that also, like I also had that experience of growing up, like not really being able to read the manuals for games, and to have to figure it out. Tunic, yes, thank you. Having to figure it out with like context clues or like with the pictures or what have you, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, like I said, you got the faux manuals in there as well as the games magazines, and you can even it's in Japanese, but much like I had with Japanese manuals back then, like there's certain elements that you can see, like where it's got button inputs or like little images of stuff. Like you can still discern quite a bit of that stuff even without resorting to the FAQs that people put out there for the DS original releases. So it's got like. You'd be lying if you said you weren't missing out on a lot of, what makes that kind of special, because you are. But there is another aspect to it that kind of, for me, my experience specifically is kind of, it has its own kind of special value in recreating some of those experiences. So it's, I'm pleased with it so far. We'll see how well I go. I'm about halfway through the first game, basically, at this point, up to the second time that Rally King rears its head.
Cool. Anything else?
Oh, no, that'll be fine. Thank you.
All right. John, take us down the soccer hole.
Yeah, the soccer rabbit hole. So, in my never-ending quest to get involved with games that I have no time for,
good.
I decided...
More live service games for John.
More live service games. So I decided to download just for kicks FIFA, no pun intended, FIFA 23 because it's free on Game Pass, right? So really, like my history, I have kind of a checkered history.
This is the last FIFA, not the current one.
Yeah, this is last year's. So I have kind of I've always I would consider myself, I like sports games, and I've always tried to get into the EA sports games, but I find the Madden games and the NHL games, which I have tried in the past, to be unintelligible. I can't make heads or tails of the controls of those games. The control schemes are so convoluted at this point, especially Madden, where you have it seems that every single player on the field has a different control scheme, and you never really know who to control. Same thing with the NHL games, where you have all kinds of different shots you can take, and like it's just very, very complicated control schemes. So I figured I've never played any of the FIFA games, aside from maybe something on like Super Nintendo way back in the day that I might have rented at some point. But so I decided to get FIFA 23, downloaded it, started playing it, and I like it. It's pretty cool. Of course, all of these games are heavily microtransaction focused, especially Ultimate Team. But I think that's the most interesting part of it, because it's it's kind of build your own team sort of thing, collect cards and all of that kind of stuff. The prices are completely outrageous for some of these players, so I started playing FIFA 23 and I thought, okay, this is cool. So I checked out, FC 24. They've dropped the FIFA license for the newest game. And so I was just curious to see, how much, FC24, like what's going on with that game. And it was on sale for $14 for the standard edition. So I'm like, screw it. Let's just get FC24 and start playing that since it's the newest version.
Oh boy, here we go.
Right? So started playing that, and I mean, I'm enjoying it. What I like the most about it is the fact that the control scheme, you can actually kind of grasp it. There is a lot of depth to it, especially when you start kind of, I think, but it makes sense to me in the sense that as you ramp up the difficulty, I'm playing right now, I think I would say skill level, I'm somewhere between semi-pro and professional, and it goes up to, I think there's 3 above that going up to, I think there's expert, master, and ultimate above that. So I'm like right in the middle. So, if I play a really good team on professional, I'll probably get beat. If I play a bad team, I'll probably crush them. If I play on semi-pro, I'm probably beating everybody and crushing really bad teams, like beating them like 12-0 and stuff. So I'm kind of in there. So I still, if I'm playing a good team on professional, I'll have trouble scoring and stuff like that. Might lose 2-1, might lose 3-0, something like that. I never get blown out, but I'll have a hard time scoring. So that's kind of where I'm at. But I think that just the control scheme is generally pretty easy to grasp. Whereas I feel like, other games like Madden and NHL, I'm immediately lost. I just don't even really know where to start most of the time.
Is there a hit stick?
No, there's nothing like that, really.
Trash.
No. I mean, the core controls are, pass, cross, tackle, and that's pretty much it. There's not a whole lot, and then there's variations on that using the shoulder buttons and stuff like that. But it's very easy to grasp the controls, and it feels like you can do some damage with the basic controls right out of the gate, which is what I like. And of course, I mean, soccer's a simpler game, right? It just is. Pretty much you're moving the ball down the field, passing it around, trying to get cross passes, really, for the most part. And it changes a little.
Got me thinking of the Simpsons skit now.
And it changes a little bit based on the player, based on whether it's a goalkeeper or whatever. But in general, like I found myself like feeling like I had a good grasp on the controls a lot earlier than I ever would in Madden. Where with Madden, I've thought to myself, if I'm going to learn this game, I'm going to have to sit down with it for about a week and go through the training, almost like when we talked about the training with like Mortal Kombat in those games, where you feel like if you're going to be competent, you have to go through that kind of training. That's how I feel Madden is now. And that's not what I want out of a sports game. I want to be able to at least play and have some fun without having to, dig deep down. I want that to be optional, not mandatory. And with Madden, it feels mandatory. So
you don't want to have to study to play your game.
No,
basically.
I don't. It's just that's not fun to me. Or if I feel that it'll benefit me, I feel like that's like it's something I can do if I want to do that. And I feel like this is very much that. In terms of I talked about. Ultimate Team, I mean, that is still very much, if you want to get the best players, you either wheel and deal on the auction house, which it's funny, I was just reading on Reddit, and a guy was like, yeah, I barely even play the game anymore. I just kind of he plays it almost more to flip, player cards on the auction house than anything else. Like, that's the game. He's like, yeah, I barely even actually play the soccer game part of it. I just try to make as much money as I possibly can flipping cards on the auction house because, I mean, the best players are worth, millions, right? Like, 10 million, 13 million, 15 million. And I mean, and when you play a game in one of the squad battles, you're getting like 1,000 points, maybe, So that just goes to show you, but that's kind of a part of the game. And of course, I don't even know, like some of those higher players, those higher priced players, I don't even know how you could even pay real cash to get them. It's just pretty much impossible because the largest like FC points is what they call them. The largest currency in there is $90 for, I think, 12,000 points, something like that.
Whew. So,
I mean, when you're talking about millions of points, the only way that you could do that would be to just start flipping players. But yeah, I mean, overall, I'm enjoying it. I don't know how deep I'll get into Ultimate Team. I don't know. At this point, I'm just trying to, the teams that I do like, I'm just trying to get all of the different kind customized things for them. Like you can get, you can get a particular team's stadium. You can get their home kit, away kit, third kit. You can get like a crowd chant, an anthem, their badge, the team logo, all that kind of stuff. So I'm sort of going through, I'll play a couple of squad battle games, which is like where you play somebody else's team. It's, you're playing against a computer, but you're playing with somebody else, against somebody else's squad that they've built.
And these are all Ultimate Team teams.
Yeah, these are Ultimate Team teams. And so, like within Ultimate Team, there's a bunch of different modes that you can play.
Gotcha.
Some of them are co-op, some of them, and you can play other people if you want. I haven't even bothered doing that because I know I would just get destroyed, because you know how it is with sports games. Playing the computer versus playing a human, it's totally different. I mean, it's just two totally different games, different tactics. There's certain things that you learn how to do against humans that, that work against humans and don't work against the computer, and vice versa. There's certain things that you can exploit because the computer AI is crap. Just certain things you can do. So I haven't even bothered playing anybody else. But you can play people in competitive stuff and friendlies, so you can kind of do the almost like ranked versus unranked kind of thing. But yeah, and there's a lot in this game. I really wish at this point that they would just make it kind of like more like an MMO model, maybe not subscription, but it really is like when you pay $60 for a game like this, you're really just paying for like the uniform updates.
There's part of the reason that FIFA's not in the game anymore. Like, just cut that.
Yeah.
One, the license price, and two, the innumerable bribes you would have had to pay to do anything with FIFA.
Yeah, and it's funny, man. I mean, I compared them. I mean, I actually did the exercise where I played FIFA 23 and FC 24 back to back within like a day of each other, and I was like, this is the same fucking game. Like, there's nothing different. Literally the only difference is that FC 24 has the updated uniforms for the teams. And there's a couple of different menus. And, maybe they have something, there's like some small thing, like, players have like different play styles or something like that. Or there's always some little, attribute or perk that they put on players so they can say, oh, well, now we have this new feature where players have this sort of, buff on them or something like that. And you have to figure that out kind of thing. There's like always like little gimmicky things they put in there, but those games are fundamentally identical. There's no difference. So I don't really feel bad about getting FC 24 at number one because it was $14. But more so, I mean, it's the same game, so I might as well play the newest one because, FIFA.
It's the newest one.
Yeah, it's just the newest one. Like, there's really nothing, no real draw to it besides that. But yeah, it's cool. And so I was curious. Of course, they try to get you to play the mobile game for FC 24. Right. That game is surprisingly good. Really, I'm actually impressed because I'm used to playing these EA Sports games and just being like, I just, they just don't impress me. I feel like the players really don't look good, and there's just something about these games where they just feel they're so cookie cutter. But the mobile game is actually quite good. It's still microtransactions out the wazoo, but it's pretty cool because its focus is not on playing really complete games. It's more, you earn like currency and stuff like that by going almost through quest lines. There'll be like they have like a tie-in, for example, with Major League Soccer, which just started over again. So they have like a quest line where you play through the MLS Cup, play through the tournament bracket. But what it does is it says, okay, it gives you sort of a scenario where it says, okay, there's 20 minutes left in the game and you're down 2-0 and try to come back. And so you try to do that. And that's the same with the PvP part of it too, where, and I'm not sure if there's other PvP modes, but the one that I played was it's kind of a score attack. So you're trying to score more goals than your opponent. You're not playing each other directly, but you're both kind of separately trying to score goals, and you can see their goal counter at the top of the screen, and so you're trying to outscore them at a certain set amount of time. So those kind of activities like that. It's more activity related rather than game related and scenarios, stuff like that. But it's pretty cool and it looks really good. Both games have really good soundtracks, which kind of caught me off guard. I'm used to kind of like just like cheeseball soundtracks with most of these games, like kind of like, I don't know, just a lot of like very predictable sort of songs in it. But these actually
obvious choices.
Yeah, very obvious choices. Skewing towards like alternate arena rock sort of things.
Yeah.
But these ones actually have some interesting stuff from around the world. There's a lot of international artists, which is cool. So it's not as US focused, which actually makes it more interesting to me, because with Madden, it's going to be all American artists, right? So that's pretty impressive. And actually, even the mobile game has actually I think it's a unique soundtrack, because I don't think any of those songs. I mean, so they're both very much the same, where there's always music playing, kind of in the menus and stuff like that. And so both games have that. So yeah, overall, I'm pretty impressed. It's pretty cool. And I enjoy playing sports games, so it's good to finally find a sports game that I'm like, yeah, that's actually enjoyable and I can play it. And there's a lot of objectives based stuff to get packs. Like you can go through and there's like kind of like there's squad building challenges, which I haven't really dug into, but that's a lot of things like, build a squad with this collection of of players. And then there's like a manager mode, and there's all kinds of stuff in here. So it's really cool. So there's a lot to dig into. So
cool.
I'm enjoying it.
Well, welcome to your new service game.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yep.
And they did actually bother to kind of update it more substantially with Switch, didn't they? Because what they'd been doing was what John was saying about, they've just put the roster update or whatever. That's literally what the Switch games had been for years.
They were the classic mode or whatever they were calling it.
The legacy edition type of thing, right? And they just weren't changing the underlying game at all. But I guess with the brand shift, it was like the impetus to say maybe we should actually do a genuinely new version and get it somewhat. I don't know how close it is to parity with the other. Obviously never going to be on all the same levels in terms of the technical performance stuff, but it's just in terms of like modes and the way it plays and all that. I think it was caught up. The FC24 was closing the gap a fair bit with the other versions for Switch.
Well, I mean, I could see the phone version. I could see that would be pretty. That game looks really good on the phone, right? So, I mean, obviously it doesn't look as good as it does on Xbox, but it plays very comparably. I'm not a huge fan of the mobile controls with the on-screen. It just always feels like you're kind of you have to work extra hard to get your player to move. I'm not a fan. I'd probably like to try it maybe with a controller at some point. I just feel like it would be more precise, like just always the virtual on-screen control stick is always so mushy to me. Like it's just like, I don't know, it's always weird. Yeah. So especially with a game like that where you're trying to precisely move your character in traffic most of the time. So, but
that makes sense.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Cool. All right, Guillaume, what do you want to do?
Yeah, I'm at the end because I'm the cooler who doesn't have much to say. I guess I can mention very quickly that I'm still playing not Mario Kart, Mortal Kombat.
Mortal Kombat, initials, the other MK.
But very different, very different game. Still playing Mortal Kombat 11, but very slowly because we had. Karen's mom was staying over for the past week, and but even when Karen's mom is not here, Karen is around, and I don't want to play Mortal Kombat in front of her because it is a disgusting game, and
family that slays together.
So yeah, I'm still enjoying it a lot, and in fact, there's been a sale recently. I got Mortal Kombat XL. The previous one, the one before that, rather, for like $10. Haven't gotten around to that yet, but yes, it's still very fun. I don't know, it's very disgusting. I wish it were less disgusting because it's also very funny, like Shao Kahn, like one of the. So I saw one of Shao Kahn's fatalities, and he just takes like this big hammer, and the opponent is on their hands and knees, and he just like swings that hammer right on top of their head, which of course just goes through the entire body, like shoots out the ass, with the spinal column just dangling under the head. And it's like, wow, that's that's imaginative and pretty funny, but also very gross, like you've got several characters just splitting people in two, and you see all the gore and stuff, and it's fairly realistic looking, like back when this game, I looked it up, I didn't realize that it was this game in particular, but Mortal Kombat 11, like there was a Kotaku article about this, I guess this artist working on it who was saying that they were developing PTSD from working on it because they were made to watch videos of cows being
awesome.
Whatever. Yeah. Being, what's the word?
What slaughtered, butchered.
Yeah. And, like having to, look at the textures of the pictures of innards and what have you. Anyway, pretty gross stuff. I wouldn't want to, personally, I would change jobs if I had to do that, but even just looking at the game, like clearly this person, despite the trauma, managed to make pretty good looking guts, and so now I have to look at that in video game form. And I kind of wish that there was like any option at all. Like I don't want like like it might be good, like some sort of like cartoony filter where you just like don't see the details. It just turns into, like all of a sudden cel shaded. But like anything at all, like just like let me have the camera be just panned out, because usually the camera will be right there. Like it's basically a mini cutscene that's playing. It's not like the Mortal Kombat 1, 2, 3 where you're always seeing the side view, like the combat arena from the same perspective as always. So, yeah, anyway, but I don't know. Again, as I said last week, you kind of get desensitized to it, so that's good. And, like Mortal Kombat 1's about half off right now also, so I guess it's not doing that well, or I don't know, maybe it's about the time that it takes for games to get deeply discounted these days, but I can wait. I see them like selling one character for like 12 Canadian bucks. I'm not gonna fall for this.
I do like the way in with regard to sales over here with the weekly charts now. They've started to do breakdowns of multi-format games. So like what percentage each kind of platform accounts for of the game. If so, and it's kind of interesting seeing the differences with what multi-format games switch. Kind of like sometimes it's got like 50% like for certain games that maybe kind of mesh well with the audience, and like I think with EA FC for instance it's usually about 25%, so like not as much of the sales as PlayStation but more than Microsoft. With Mortal Kombat 1 it is appropriately enough 1% virtually every time I've ever seen it is the Switch version, because it was kind of infamous when it launched, right, because it had all these not only was it always going to be way behind technically, but just like it had a bunch of problems, because it's probably like an impossible job basically to get that on Switch, but that tickles me.
You're playing the I don't know 2600 Pac-Man version basically or something.
Oh god. As someone who's played that, no.
Yeah. So I'm playing that, and I'm playing Spider-Man still, although it's fun enough. I don't have anything to say about it. And otherwise... I guess...
Crucial follow-up from last week's Spider-Man Faces discussion. Went on Internet Movie Day, because I said this reminded me of a film that I hadn't actually seen, but it's actually reminded me of two films that I hadn't seen. Okay. So, first of all, the whole thing about the backpack, right? That was Finding Forrester. That is the that's Joel Connery like his house gets broken into by someone on a dare and they leave their backpack behind that's full of like their creative writing or something. And then instead of like reporting them to the police, like basically Connery edits their work. And apparently this is the basis for the rest of the movie. But the thing where the thesis is like the only copy and is being held hostage is a Joe Pesci movie from years before called With Honor. So that's just, I know everyone must have been just completely on edge wondering what was this film. Well, it was
It's a movie I've seen when I was a teenager. I don't remember anything about it except that I probably misremembered Joe Pesci being in it, because it just, I think that my memory, my brain was like, isn't that kind of a Robin Williams type of thing here? And I think that my brain edited in Robin Williams, edited out Joe Pesci. And so I was like, yeah, of course, like Robin Williams and what's his face, Canadian Encino Man, whatever. Anyway,
Brendan Fraser.
So yeah, Brendan Fraser, yeah, in some college movie I didn't really understand, because I was a teenager. I was not ever going to get into an American college, probably. Anyway, whatever. So Spider-Man, still playing it, about like 42% into it, and I think that probably I'm just going to mainline the story, because taking down gangs is something that I feel like Spider-Man does a lot in video games, and just hardly never in movies and probably comics, because you got to have that kind of that filler of you can't always be fighting Rhino at every corner, I suppose. It's a little bit weird to just like fighting gang after gang. It's like what is this, like a Daredevil game? I don't know.
Guillaume, the film was called With Honors from 1994, by the way. It's Joe Pesci. I've never heard of this film.
It amazes me that I had any retention of this stuff, but it just, I think what it was, in the mid-90s, it was like the first sort of period where I had access to subscription movie channel on satellite TV over here. So like, I just like, but there still wasn't that much to watch. So you just end up watching like, the movie chart, like between movies, like they'd have the charts, or they'd have like featurettes on upcoming films. I would actually sit there and watch this because there was fuck all else to watch.
Yeah, sure.
And so you could never actually see these things, but still retain stuff. And then, probably once you get to like the 21st century and, I've got the internet with like respectable speeds, all that just stops.
And very quickly, with Karen and her mom, been playing a little bit of Dr. Mario 64. As I said last time, that again, Dr. Mom, Karen's mom, stayed with us. We played a lot of that, and I said on the podcast that it was a very good multiplayer game for a specific type of, group of people, like you can very easily, the handicaps or the difficulty level for each person is very granular, and so you can adjust the difficulty in such a way that everyone can have a good time. I just kept bumping my difficulty level up by one level every time that I would win, basically, so that it always stayed interesting. But this time I realized, like, okay, something's happening. Karen's mom was not really improving in the way that I expected her to. And so I actually like sat down and showed her like, well, like here's what you want to do. And I showed her how you can have basically chain reactions by setting up the pills a certain way, right? Which is not, a concept that's foreign to any of us, I don't think. But I figure like if you've only ever played Tetris before then, there's no such thing as a chain reaction, right? So maybe it was not like that obvious. And so, and even, I had noticed that Karen often used a full 5 pill or 5 like of the same color row to make a virus disappear. And so I was like, yeah, well, sometimes you probably want to put that pill sideways, because actually you've got like 2 reds on horizontally here, and like you want to, like you don't want to just waste that extra little bit of pill. Like you only need 4. So just aligning 4 of the same color when you don't need to. Well, anyway, when it's advantageous for you to have that extra, when you can put that extra 5th bit of pill to work. I don't know if this makes sense to anyone, but anyway, it's basically like I gave them a quick tutorial, and after that, it actually, a marked improvement. They had been complaining that I was sending them a lot of garbage pills in multiplayer, and all of a sudden I was getting a whole lot more than I had ever been getting. So there was a tangible effect, and I actually had to bump down my difficulty level because it was very annoying. And so, so it was a fun time. It's a fun game if you've got the NSO expansion. I recommend depending, like if you've got people who don't really play video games outside of the odd puzzle game, like it's a good one to pull out. So, yeah, that was my week.
Cool. All right. Well, that is going to do it for us for New Business and indeed the show. Greg, what is our music for this week?
Well, just about a couple of days, I think, before we started recording anyway, on April the 2nd, is the 30th anniversary of the Japanese release of Final Fantasy VI. Which of course was later brought out in America as Final Fantasy III, and not brought out in Europe at that time, and only received the game later on. But yeah, there's going to be a few of these, more than a few, of just there's a stone cold classics in '94. Obviously, we already had Super Metroid covered. I'm sure we won't cover them all with closing music stuff, but of course, I mean, Final Fantasy VI. A landmark soundtrack as well as a landmark game, definitely very, very strong. I guess it's kind of the end of an era in a way, because even though there would be quite a few notable Square, games on the Super Nintendo before the end of the generation, especially in Japan, there was a great many sort of like games right up until the moment that they just hard switched over to PlayStation, in like 96 or whatever exactly that was. But, in particular, like really fondly remembered classics like Chrono Trigger and Super Mario RPG came after Final Fantasy VI. However, this is like basically the end for like the mainline Final Fantasy numbered games, like being, launching on a Nintendo platform as the lead platform. Like, yes, you can play, the pixel remasters of 1 through 6 on Switch. You can, you've got, all the way up to 12 as well. With ports and things, but, you never again was it going to be the case of like, okay, no, this is like the new Final Fantasy mainline game is launching on Nintendo hardware, which is kind of, whereas, obviously Dragon Quest, came back eventually, for instance, and stuff, and there's been plenty of spin-offs, but, this was kind of it. But what a note to kind of leave on, because in a lot of ways, it was Final Fantasy VI that laid the groundwork for, where they would take the series with 7. They just didn't have the kind of, like the polygonal graphics or the pre-renders of the video kind of stuff. But, when you think about what they're doing here in terms of drama and indeed with the soundtrack stuff, like the opera scene and all that, like the ambition and where they were going to take things were very clear. But yeah, of course, spoilt for choice, really, with all the wonderful tracks in there, some of Uematsu's most kind of fondly remembered work, I would think. But what I'm going with is the sort of second overworld theme. There is a major event that happens in the middle of the game. Like, it's not kind of silly being coy about it because it is 30 years old. And also, didn't they spoil it back then with like a map that came with the game?
Yeah, I think so.
The second overworld, but given the nature of the event and what the second overworld represents, this second overworld theme is sort of surprisingly kind of up tempo and like energetic. It is not, say, for instance, the overworld theme of the kind of Lavos ruined future in Chrono Trigger. It's very like probably even more so than the first one. It's like kind of driving, like, yes, there's work to be done, but it's fantastic. So absolutely typically brilliant Square Uematsu Super Nintendo baseline. Just great stuff.
Cool. All right. Well, on that, it is time for us to go. Bye, everybody.
Later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.